I believe we are live. Brian is stumbling around his apartment when I told him we were about to go live. Hello, everyone in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. First of all, please let me know in the chat room if you could see us and hear us okay, because we're trying out brand new software for the first time.
Wow. So exciting. What a great start.
No, this isn't the actual show, Brian. This is just me talking to the chat room people and the live show people. Okay, yeah. Were you making fun of me there?
I mean, it wasn't that amazing or exciting.
Well, I'm trying to just I want them to be aware that we're trying something new so that they could know and be our, beta testers if there's a problem. But Alex, thank you. Don't listen to Brian. I appreciate it. Brian looks super bright. Oh, wait, but Brian, I think your camera just froze.
I am bright.
Oh, no, you just had a glitch.
The first of many.
Uh-oh, maybe you should lower the resolution. Okay.
I'm also making my slow draft pick. So Mason on Mason's request.
Okay, Mason saying it's great quality. It's very exciting. Look at this, guys. You want to see something cool? So Mason just wrote, "This is great quality." How about it's on the show now that Mason said that? What? With his face.
Looking good, Mason.
So, if you want, make sure your profile picture is something you're happy with. Because I might put your comment on the show for everyone to see. So yeah, I'm glad that people are saying the quality is good. So we're using StreamYard, by the way, if anyone's curious. And apparently it's going to be like totally seamless. So like everything's going still to YouTube. I was so nervous that Hangouts was going away. We have to come up with a new thing. Now this like StreamYard thing is like we record here and everything just goes to YouTube as normal for you all. So very, very exciting. I'm very excited, Brian. This is a brand new. The only big caveat at this point is that right now it's free, and at some point they're going to raise the price. And so hopefully it won't be too expensive, but I don't know. Right now it seems like our only option. Damn, I'm so excited. Like I really was nervous about this and it's going so well.
What a day. What a special day.
All right, so I guess we can start the actual show now. And did you guys see that comment? Yeah, I guess Alex wrote damn because he. So, this is a weird thing. Now that we're doing this like screen by screen thing, you guys will see me like drinking water and doing all stuff like that while Brian's talking.
I always had to see.
Yeah, now you all see, and I'll be able to, laugh or roll my eyes at things. I often am rolling my eyes. Not often, but sometimes. Sometimes I'm expressive. I shouldn't only say rolling my eyes.
You snigger.
But also sometimes I gasp in interest. I have reactions to things you're saying, so now people will be able to know. Okay.
There you go, Mason. Mason took his next pick. I picked David Perron as my fourth right winger.
Is that oh, damn. I was thinking of taking him as my... Oh, but I think I was looking at Perron, but then I realized my three right wingers are also good. That I had like other positions where I had a lot more, like in that one, I think I have Justin Falk and Clefbaum on D. So I took Ryan Suter as my extra D, hoping at least two of those three could be good. Hopefully.
This, by the way, is the slow draft that has gone the worst for me. Like I have read every situation wrong. Like I've always been like, oh yeah, I'll get this guy at the turn. And then like he goes next. Well, and I could have gotten the guy that I like in all likelihood.
You don't know. Yeah. Well, that's why you practice, right?
Yeah. It's been so bad I'm almost embarrassed.
I've started almanac prep. I've already done 3 teams and I've been putting little notes in it being like reference the slow draft ADP. So I'm excited. I guess we'll have to wait till we're done all of them and then I'll start like inserting ADPs of slow drafts for different players.
ADP.
Anyway, maybe that's boring for people. All right. Shall we?
It's okay, Elon. Nick Schmaltz is still out there for you.
I think I have 3 good centers also. I think it's like left wing is my big problem in that one. I need to like...
Well, there's like no one left. I took Ryan Dzingel in one. That was a big mistake. He might have even been my third guy.
We'll talk about Ryan Dzingel in this episode.
Yeah, and you'll hear how I'm not so excited about his prospects.
Okay, well, I'm ready to go. Let's do it. Okay. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody! Hey, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys on air, Karlsson in their keeper pools. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as always, is the fantasy hockey robot who's here to break down all the remaining off-season transactions, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be back. A little extended vacay for me, but there was some really great content in the meantime. You had a good pick, bad pick, 1 episode for the public, 2 if you're a patron. Well, I don't need to lay that on you just yet, though. Listen to the whole show. We'll plug it a couple more times, but we hope you enjoy this this free edition of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
Okay, the podcast, by the way, will always be free, and but Brian, we gotta sprinkle out our promos and
yeah, that was a sprinkle.
Yeah, Brian, we gotta sprinkle out our promos throughout. We don't want to lay it on too thick because we do have a lot of exciting announcements to make. But of course, we want to get to all the content because, like I said, a couple weeks ago, we did that great good pick, bad pick episode with Dave Benton. We've had a lot of good feedback about that. So maybe we'll have to do a version 3 at some point. That was a lot of fun. If you didn't listen to that, I think you'll enjoy it. Before that, we did a show after July 1st covering a bunch of the big trades and free agent signings. We covered, Panarin going to the Rangers and, Phil Kessel getting traded and Tyson Barrie. And we covered a lot of the big ones, but now there's still so many that we haven't covered. And so that's what we're going to do in this week's show. And I'm really excited about it. Before we get into it, of course, let's mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com. Super proud to be presented by them. They're going to be having their fantasy guide coming out any week now. But in the meantime, this is Bubble Keeper Week on Dobber Hockey, and it's been really fun following all their articles all week long. Just lots of articles about players who a lot of us are deciding, should I keep them in my keeper league or not? They've had articles, talking about Ristolainen or Shea Weber or Justin Schultz, Donskoy. I guess that's for a super deep league. There was some about Trubus. A lot of interesting articles with this concept of if they're a bubble keeper and if you should keep them or not. So yeah, it's a lot of fun happening on DobberHockey.com. But we're about to have a lot of fun on Keeping Karlsson. And so why don't we get started? My plan is to clear the deck, right? I want to talk about every single relevant transaction that we haven't covered yet in the offseason. So after that, we're set and ready to move into talking about next season. And I want to start in Dallas because they lost Matt Zuccarello to free agency. So that was a bummer. They also lost Jason Spezza to free agency, which I'm sure they don't care about. But I think they made up for it because they signed Joe Pavelski to a 3-year deal. They also signed Corey Perry to a 1-year deal. And they even took a shot at Andre Sekera from the Isle. Wait, 1 sec. Brian, are you messaging me?
No.
Oh, I need to turn off my, okay, 1 sec. Sorry, everybody. It's going to be super smooth after this.
Damn.
Corey Perry to a 1-year deal. They even took a shot at Andre Sekera from the Oilers for a 1-year deal. We'll see if that works out for them. Obviously, the big news here is Joe Pavelski coming to the Dallas Stars. Got to imagine this is going to be a great landing spot for Pavelski, right? Because he will slot nicely into a top 6 that already has Sagan, Ben, and Radulov, as well as a group of hints. Maybe Corey Perry, maybe that rounds out the top 6, as well as on all of a sudden, really star-studded top power play. Imagine this: Sagan, Ben, Radulov, Pavelski, Klingberg. That's the top power play that teams facing Dallas are going to have to look at. Damn, that might be a really awesome unit if they could, figure out the chemistry and all of that stuff. Keep in mind, Matt Zuccarello came into a similar role, and he put up 3 points in 2 regular season games and then 11 points in 13 playoff games. So Zuccarello was really thriving in the role that I think Joe Pavelski is about to step into. And I don't think it's controversial to say that Pavelski is a better player than Matt Zuccarello. So I'm really excited about Joe Pavelski. He's 35 years old, but he's coming off a really solid season. He put up 38 goals, 26 assists for 64 points in 75 games. It's a 70-point pace. He's been above a 66-point pace for the past 6 seasons now, and he doesn't seem to be slowing down. I know, Brian, when you talk about him, you're going to bring up his high shooting percentage from this past season, but still, I find it hard not to project another, say, 70 points at least as his pace with the exposure he'll be getting to all of these stars on Dallas. What do you think?
Well, let me first say that I am also I'm happy that Pavelski landed where he did. I think Dallas is a good new spot for him. I had some angst about Pavelski as his contract expired, thinking about him. Well, first, just the mental image of him wearing any jersey other than the Sharks is kind of a trip. And then also Pavelski moving out of San Jose means he's moving to a depth chart where he may not be so much the guy anymore or one of the guys. I found it hard to imagine where Pavelski could end up and still be in as good a place to put up big points as he was in San Jose, because the teams for whom a 35-year-old Joe Pavelski would have to be their number one center and he'd get that great deployment just didn't match the profile of a team that should actually try and go out and sign him, which meant that Pavelski was probably going to have to be a second line centerman somewhere. And maybe without the line mates he's had the last few years, including Couture, Evander Kane, Timo Meyer, Joe Thornton, and Patrick Marleau a few years back. But I do really like Dallas as a landing spot because of that top power play that you already mentioned. Elon, thinking about Pavelski up there, that's a nice place for him to try and keep those power play point totals up above 20 for another year, maybe two. But at 5-on-5, I find it hard to maintain the same optimism for Joe Pavelski. Are we going to see 19 or 20 minutes a night from him like we did in San Jose? Probably not. And there's also a chance that Pavelski is the only star, figuratively, not literally, because there's going to be 3 stars on his line, including him. But there's a chance he's the only, stud on his line if he does end up with Corey Perry and Rupe Hintz, who both have their own upside, but are not the bona fides that Pavelski has had with him on a line the last several seasons. Of course, there is a best case scenario where Pavelski gets to play with one of Radulov or Ben as Dallas shifts lines around to try and have a top 6 with full and actual depth for the first time in years, which is also exciting to think of those possibilities. But we don't know that's going to happen. It's not automatic. And so we need to consider this change of deployment and change of scenery in tandem with the actual numbers that he put up last year. So even if he had stayed in San Jose, I'd have pointed out that Pavelski's 5-on-5 shooting percentage from last year, it was at 16% for the third time in his long and storied career. But Pavelski is generally closer to 10% shooting when everything's going normally for him. And that shooting percentage from 10 to 16%, like that accounts for like 7 or 8 of his 21 goals at 5-on-5. Pavelski also had an unsustainable shooting percentage on the power play, which, if we're even being generous, probably got him like an extra 3 or so goals than normally would have. And I'm just not seeing any other way to justify those extra even strength and power play goals outside of saying, yeah, shooting percentage spike. It happened to work out for him. So there's no denying that Pavelski had a great year last year, 38 goals, and on an 82-game pace, he'd have broken 40. He'd have had 42 goals. That would mark a career high in his age 34 season, but I just can't expect the same again this year, not with his new 2C status and not with fewer minutes and not with expected regression to his shooting percentages. I think Joe Pavelski is much more a 25-30 goal guy than he is a 40 goal guy. And that's even if he is like a top line center or top line right wing. So I'm actually going to land closer to the 25 goal mark for Joe Pavelski next year, which is like a big cut, right? He had 38 last year, paced for 42, and I'm saying 25 goals. So I hear that. And I tried to talk myself out of it, but I couldn't. But what I am going to do for Joe Pavelski is try and get him towards 40 assists, which would bring him to 65 points. But to do that, he's going to need either a rebirthed Corey Perry, a broken out Rupe Hintz, or lots of 5-on-5 time with one of Ben Radulov. I don't know, maybe there's even a world where he plays with Sagan at even strength. And all of those scenarios are big question marks, right? We don't know that Hintz and Perry are going to be really great line mates for him. We don't know that if that doesn't happen, that he's going to get to spend time with Ben and Radulov. The difficulty also for me in pinning exactly where Pavelski goes in this new role is that he hasn't had this role for a very long time. Like, Pavelski's been seeing 19 minutes a game since his age 24 season. That was his 3rd season in the league. And while trying to talk myself out of saying Pavelski's not going to hit 70 points, I'm trying to also remember that time that I counted him out of repeating a big performance back in the early fledgling days of keeping Karlsson. I think that was like our first season. He had just had a big breakout. And I was like, nah, he's not going to keep taking shots the way he did. So he's not going to keep scoring the goals he did. Well, he actually did keep up those shot counts. So good for him. But this time, I think I'm going to be right. I don't see much reason to hope for more than 65 points from Joe Pavelski, which is kind of a bummer, but also just the natural order of things.
I don't know, Brian. I feel like I'm a bit surprised that you're like so confident, or it sounds like you're really in on this. Like, he's going to have to play with Rupe Hintz and Corey Perry. Like, last year, Matt Zuccarello came in, and I think they've been dying to get Jamie Benn on the second line and split up Seguin, Radulov, and Ben like forever. They just then had no, people for Ben to play with, and they didn't like having them all on the top lines, and they had no depth for the rest of the lineup. I think this is the opportunity that I think it's going to be almost for sure in my mind. I haven't even considered what you're saying. Like, I've been thinking it's going to be Pavelski with Jamie Benn and someone else, and maybe leave Rupe Hintz to play with Seguin and Radulov on the top line because he was clicking so well with them at the end of last season. And I feel like if you've got Ben and Pavelski on the second line together, that's a great situation. I don't see why they wouldn't give those guys big minutes. Like, Jamie Benn plays big minutes. Like, why would they want to, stack the top line in terms of ice time, give them each like 23 minutes a game and lower it on the second line? I think they would play them both pretty evenly. Plus, I love his situation on the power play. So I think when we record our almanac, which I'll talk about in a second, I think we're going to be differing on our projections. I think I'm going to go closer to 70. It sounds like you're closer to 65. So we'll see. Obviously, the deployment makes a big difference, but I really don't see the deployment going the way that you seem to be implying.
But what I'm even saying is that Pavelski, to get those 40 assists on top of his 25 goals, he's going to need Jamie Benn with him, which is why I'm still like, okay, I can get to 65 points for Joe Pavelski. I can be optimistic about his deployment scenario, but even if that all breaks right, I don't think he's scoring more than 25 goals or a lot more than 25 goals. And I also don't think he's getting more than 40 assists at this point either. So like those are both, I think, the peaks of what his performance is capable of. And if everything breaks right and well for him, he's got 65. I don't see him shooting 20% again this year. And I don't see any other route, like aside from unsustainable shooting percentage, like if somehow these spikes and weirdnesses and variants stick, which they generally don't, then yeah, I just don't see a way for him to do it with every piece of variance in check.
Yeah, okay. I know that you don't see him scoring more than 25 goals. I guess I'm saying I do see him maybe scoring 30 goals. And
well, no, you were saying that like, oh, like I'm totally discounting the chance he plays with Jamie Benn. Not at all. He can play with Jamie Benn. Like, he needs to play with Jamie Benn.
Yeah. And let's actually talk about Jamie Benn. So let's move on, because aside from Pavelski, and talking about him, there's all these other players that are now affected by him showing up. And I feel like Jamie Benn, he's the one that jumps out to me because he's coming off his worst season since he was a rookie, as he ended with a sad 53 points in 78 games for a 56-point pace. What? He had 79 points just the season before. He had a fall in points, just like you're projecting for Joe Pavelski. But Ben, I feel like, is still a really good player, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that while he did have some time with Seguin and Radulov, like we were discussing, he spent a lot of time playing with the likes of Blake Como, Radek Faksa, Jason Spezza, Jason Dickinson, Joel Esperance, like not the types of guys that you're going to be putting up big even strength points with, no matter how good of a player you are. And by the way, since I'm mentioning random players, Mason did make an interesting comment in the chat room saying maybe like Gurianov or Dickinson could be good sleeper in a deep league to the guys that could maybe get on that second line. So yeah, we're obviously been throwing out a lot of names. I don't want to just imply that Corey Perry like for sure is getting on that second line. But anyways, back to Jamie Benn. Like I said, he had bad line mates, and I'd imagine when he did get his ice time on the Seguin and Radulov line, they were always facing the opposition's top D, since the other lines like weren't threats at all. So other teams would be like, yeah, put our best people against that stacked top line. Now, Ben is pretty much guaranteed to always be playing with at least one of Seguin, Radulov, or Pavelski, maybe even two. And the Stars' opponents will now have to spread out their defenses over these top two lines. So I feel like everything is shaking out to me that Ben is a prime bounce back candidate for next season. I'd be very curious to know how you would rank him, Radulov, and Pavelski next season, because I feel like all three of those stars are very intriguing right now. I know you're putting Pavelski last from what you just said, but yeah, are you with me that Jamie Benn is a guy that's probably going to fall in drafts later than you've ever been able to get him, especially in a league that counts hits, by the way, because he's still been great for that. And I could see him now finally with a good line mate at even strength, and also obviously improved top power play. I feel like he could maybe get back to like 75, maybe 80 points. Let me know if I'm being too crazy here.
No, I don't think so. I think Pavelski coming to Dallas is a great fail-safe for Jamie Benn, right? If the coach doesn't like him or he's not performing and they want to shuffle him around, he won't have Seguin, but he's going to have Pavelski. He's got someone else he can really meaningfully succeed with. And that's a real thumbs up for Jamie Benn going into this year. You look at his season last year, Jamie Benn had a bad time. He had a low 5-on-5 IBP, a low 5-on-5 on-ice shooting percentage. He was knocked off the top power play for the first time since breaking out in his age 22, 23-year-old seasons. And when he was on the top power play, he had an abysmal power play IPP, which means he just could not get himself to get a point on any goals that were scored. His secondary assists dried up in all situations. And beneath all of that variance, like all of those things are things that can fluctuate randomly without really reflecting much of a player's effort or talent. Outside of those things, there weren't really any large flags about Jamie Benn's play. So that's why I'm excited about him bouncing back. But how much of a bounce back is something we need to keep in mind, because there is one piece that I'm not sure he's got a full bounce back in him for, and that's the shots on goal piece. Like, even if all the other things do regress in a positive way, Jamie Benn on his own accord has fallen off his huge shooting paces from the mid 2010s, when you could count on him for like 250 shots on goal, maybe more. But in 2 of the last 3 years, Jamie Benn has paced for 215 or fewer shots on goal. So look, I'd like Jamie Benn to become a 3-shot per game guy again to restore full faith in his ability, but I'm not certain that's in the cards. But in any case, shots on goal aside, I'm still happy with 200 or more shots, 25, 30 goals, 45 assists from Ben, which comes to, like a 70, 75 point bounce back season. I'm really not so concerned about him.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, right? Because normally, before last season, you had to use like a 2nd-round pick, maybe if you were lucky to get Jamie Benn. I remember people would be so excited if they could get Benn and Sagan in the first 2 rounds. Guess what? Now you can get Benn and Sagan in the first 2 rounds if you want. But obviously, there is the chance Ben has shown us that maybe he's just falling off. Like, it could just, but you're saying, Brian, that a lot of the underlying numbers look good for him and it was low variance. So yeah, we're all in on Ben. We're keeping Ben this year. Brian, what do you think about my ranking question? If we had to rank who you want to draft between Ben, Radulov, Pavelski for next season, how would you rank them?
If it's a hits league, I'll still go Ben first. If it's not, I think I'll go Radulov. I think Ben's ceiling might be a little higher, but I also wonder if he'll be used just an teeny bit less.
Okay, and then Pavelski down at the bottom after Rupe Hintz, after Corey Perry.
Oh no!
I'm just kidding. Okay, let's cover another couple guys since we're here on Dallas before jumping to the Sharks to gauge the impact of Pavelski leaving. Seems like Pavelski arriving should be like a good news, bad news situation for someone like Rupe Hintz, who we've brought up a couple of times already. He made a big splash at the end of last season. He put up 4 goals and 7 assists in his final 14 games after getting on the top line with Sagan Radulov, as well as on the top power play because Zuccarello was injured. Hintz also had 8 points in 13 playoff games, so just a really solid guy for the team. On the plus side, seems like he'll have a much better chance of holding that line 1 job, since the Stars can feel okay leaving Ben, Pavelski, and someone else like Corey Perry, say, on the second line, like we've been discussing. On the minus side, I feel like there's no way Hintz gets more of that top power play time unless someone gets injured, because who are you bumping out of Pavelski, Ben, Sagan, Radulov to give Hintz a spot on the top power play? So the way I see it, Hintz's 50-point pace on the second power play in the playoffs, because in the playoffs, Zuccarello was there, right? And Hintz put up a 50-point pace. That seems like a lot more of a likely outcome than like the 65-point pace he was putting up in that final stretch in the regular season. Still, even like a 50-point pace, maybe you could bounce that up to 55. That could be a really nice late pick in a draft. I'm not like as excited about Rupe Hintz as some people are, just because I feel like there is a ceiling for players who aren't likely to see top power play time. But I still think he's a guy that we should have on our radars and should probably be drafted in most leagues next season.
Totally. If he's in the Dallas top 6, he's playing with either Tyler Sagan or Joe Pavelski. So you want him. He's going to be involved in some offense. Elon, I agree that he's not going to be very involved in the top power play unless there's an injury, or unless for whatever reason the Stars get really cocky with their new depth by having Joe Pavelski and try and have 2 power plays running evenly, which would be an awful decision. But Hintz you could probably count on. I think 50 points seems fair. Maybe he can pick up about 10 power play points from the second unit, and then maybe 40, maybe 45 at even strength, depending on how well things are going.
Yeah. Hey, maybe Miro Heiskanen is amazing at running a power play. That second power play will be okay, but still, like 10, maybe 15 if we're lucky power play points for Rupe Hintz. Okay, then we have Corey Perry. We waited until February for him to play his first game last season, and we were rewarded with a sad 10 points in 31 games. Like, Brian, sometimes we recommend for people in the last round of a draft, take an injured guy, throw him in your IR. Then it's like you get a free player, come the second half of the season when you need him most for the fantasy playoffs or whatever. So anyone who did that, hopefully, obviously they didn't have to use a high pick for Corey Perry, and good because he stunk. Like I said, 10 points in 31 games. It was like that rotten treasure box in Survivor Pearl Islands. I don't know if you remember that. Like both tribes had a treasure box, and then when you won reward challenges, I guess you got keys, and then at some point you got all the keys to unlock the locks, and then like everything was spoiled, and that's what to me what Corey Perry was last season. I was excited for him to come, and then it ended up being a big bummer. Still, it was only one season prior that Perry gave us a solid 49 points in 71 games for a 57-point pace. That's not too bad. At 34, he's obviously a far cry from the Perry of old, but do you see any chance that he could be worth looking at in drafts, or do you see him as more of like a watch list guy? Maybe he'll be good for stretches. We'll mention on keeping Karlsson when he's playing on a good line, but maybe he's more of like a bottom sixer at this point. Like, I'm kind of curious to see. You've kind of always liked Corey Perry, I feel like. So I feel like you're going to say that maybe you would take a chance on him, but like right off the bat, you would prefer like a Rupe Hintz over Corey Perry, right? So,
well, first I'll correct you. I don't think I've always liked Corey Perry. In fact, I think I was amongst the first to suggest that, after his 2014-15 season where he paced for 67 points, I'm pretty sure I said this is as good as it's going to get. And sure enough, he went to 62 points after that in pace, 53 points after that, 57 points after that. And
Brian, actually, you're right. That was a classic. This is a classic Brian Com, everyone. Like, Brian, says a player is not that good, and then he's usually right, and they go down, and then all of a sudden you flip, and now you're like, now that player is good because he's like too underrated, and you're like, no, he's still good because you do like the old guys. So yeah, I'm thinking more of the more recent liking old Corey Perry when everyone else says he's garbage. You're like, oh, maybe there's still something there. But yeah, you've definitely called it before.
Yeah, so I would say that Corey Perry is a huge wild card for this season, except for the fact that, when I say that, you expect that maybe there's some huge shot at upside, and I want to drive home the point that that's not what I'm saying, consistent with my previous takes on Corey Perry, that his best days are behind him. But here's why I'm still going to say that, yes, Elon, you're right. I am bullish on Corey Perry to be fantasy relevant next season. These are my reasons. First, last season, his 5-on-5 shot generation numbers, they looked okay. Not his strongest outing, but not fall off a cliff bad. Also, I want you to remember that he was on an Anaheim team that literally sunk everybody on it. Getzlaf, Raquel, Fowler. The dunks sunk Corey Perry too, and that shows in his abysmal 4.5% 5-on-5 on ice shooting percentage, which is just awful. Like, you hope that you have twice that amount, and that's reasonably normal. Like, that's not asking for a whole lot to have a 9% on ice shooting percentage. Corey Perry, while he was on the ice, the Ducks shot 4.5%. Brutal. Also last season, Corey Perry was on the second power play, which frankly, I expect the same to happen in Dallas, but we need to remember that when accounting for the reasons why Corey Perry failed to meet expectations that might have been a little higher than they would have been had we known he wasn't going to be on the second power play. And finally, here's one more reason why I'm bullish on Corey Perry having some kind of rebound this season. He played 31 games, spent almost 500 minutes on the ice, but got 0 secondary assists. Like, Corey Perry has never been mistaken for a setup man, but that's weird even for him to play 31 games and not just happen by accident to pick up a secondary assist. And that again speaks to how much trouble the Ducks had scoring. That's a big piece of that puzzle. And of course, another reason to be bullish on Corey Perry is probably going to have Pavelski or maybe even Tyler Seguin as a centerman, depending on how the chips fall. Probably Pavelski, though. Last year, Corey Perry started with Ryan Getzlaf, but 20 of his 30 games ended up being with Adam Henrique or Devon Shore as a centerman. He also averaged just 14.5 minutes a game. So all this to say, Corey Perry is in a better situation in Dallas this year, one where he is much better set up for success than he was in Anaheim last year. Like, again, don't get me wrong, I'm pretty sure that 30 or more goals, 65 or more points from Corey Perry is not going to happen again, especially without 20 power play points to help him get there. But I don't think it's unreasonable to hope for, 20 goals, 30, 35 assists. So depending on the depth of your league, he's either a solid mid or bottom roster guy to have or a good guy to stream in potentially for spot starts. I don't think he's somebody in most leagues that you need to reach for on draft day, but on a night early on in the first couple weeks of the season where you have an empty roster spot and looking for someone to stream in, he might be someone I look to.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. He seems like the kind of guy to me where we're going to find out really soon if he still has anything or not, right? So maybe he'll get a chance on that second line, like you said, and then either he can cut it and he'll stay there for a while, or they'll realize, kind of like with Jason Spezza, it's like, oh, this guy doesn't have it anymore. And then he'll just like, his deployment will go down and he'll just be a totally worthless guy. So he's going to be a tough guy to project when we do our almanac. I feel like he's going to have a lot of variance on him in terms of our projection. Why don't we get to talking about the almanac quickly? So I'll sprinkle one of our little promos here, because Brian, we have gotten to work. Like, this is serious. This is happening. We are going to be recording the world's second ever NHL audio almanac in just like 3 weeks now. We're starting to record on August 16th. I'm so scared because we have so much work to do and it's coming up, and I'm super excited for it. I've already prepped 3 teams, and by the end, hopefully by the time we start, I'll have prepped them all, and so will you, and then we'll be off and running. But yeah, the plan is that we're taking a week off of work and we're going to record an audiobook, a 32 chapter audiobook, 1 chapter per team, where we're going to break down every single player that we think is fantasy relevant on that team. We'll discuss it just like we discussed on our episodes of Keeping Karlsson, and in the end, we're going to come up with a projection for each player. We have a few other fun mechanisms we're going to throw in that we didn't do last year, like marking which players we think might have a bit more variance to them. We're also going to have a fun way of not having to argue so much about goalies. If you remember last year, we're going to fix that problem. But yeah, I'm really excited for it, and we'd love for you to get in on the pre-order. It's available to order right now at keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. And you're thinking, why do I need to pre-order it? I'll just wait till it's out and they tell me that it's ready to go and I'll get it then. Well, let me tell you some reasons. First of all, you'll be able to watch our recordings live or have access to them early before the final edited product is done. Second of all, we're offering a couple other little perks, such as we've been doing some slow drafts with the pre-orderers, and we're going to keep doing that. So right now we have 5 people signed up for like the next slow draft, which we're about to start. It's been a lot of fun. A slow draft is like a regular draft, except we take like, everyone has like up to 12 hours to make their pick. Obviously it goes faster than that. It's really fun to just take turns, pick by pick, and get a lot of practice drafting before next season. And also we get to learn a lot of lessons about what players people are high on and not. It's been a lot of fun. So you could get in on a slow draft. Okay, so I could say more things, but I feel like I want to get back to talking hockey. But Brian, I'm very excited for this almanac, and people, I would love for you to get in on it. So you could check out keepingkarlsson.com/almanac if you want to get in on it. Ooh, Brian, why don't you quickly tell people about the other thing we're selling related to the almanac, this chapter sponsorship, because I feel like I've been talking too much.
If you've ever had a message that you want to send out to the Keeping Karlsson masses, maybe it's about your business, or maybe it's about like a personal cause you care about, or maybe you just want to talk your competition ahead of the fantasy season, we have this option this year where you can sponsor a chapter of the almanac and you tell us what you want us to talk about. And for 60 seconds, we will do that. You can like give us an exact script to read, or you can just give us a general sense or whatever. And we will dedicate a portion of your chosen almanac chapters. If you wanted to go in the Toronto chapter or the Montreal chapter, the whatever, we'll put it in there for you. To get all the details and more, you can head over to keepingkarlsson.com/sponsor to check out what's entailed in sponsoring a chapter of the 2019-20 Keeping Karlsson Almanac.
Yeah. And also you can see which chapters are still available to sponsor, because we've been updating it as the orders have been pouring in. And by I say pouring in, we've gotten 3 so far. So still lots open.
Forget, if you wanted Vancouver, you're on to your second choice. If you wanted Vancouver and Anaheim, on to your third choice. If you wanted Vancouver, Anaheim, and some more goalies board, sorry, you've got to take your 4th choice.
Okay. So with that, let's stop with the promo. This is an ad-free episode, aside from us promoting ourselves. We're betting on ourselves, just like Robin Lehner, who we'll get to in a little bit. But now we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and then we actually have a very big announcement coming later in the show. But let's get back to the San Jose Sharks now, who lose Joe Pavelski, and let's see how that looks for them. So last season, looks like the top 2 lines were generally either Pavelski, Couture, Meyer, and then Hurdle, Kane, Donskoy, or sometimes they went with Couture, Hurdle, Meyer, and then Pavelski, Kane, Donskoy. So, okay, either way. And the third line was almost always Thornton, LeBanc, and Marcus Sorensen. So that's sort of giving you this sense of how things were before. Now with both Pavelski and Donskoy gone, that opens up 2 spots in the top 6. And one player that jumps out at me, first of all, that I feel like must get a crack at the top 6 now, is got to be Kevin LeBanc, right? Because LeBanc has been on the top power play, but always playing on that third line. But like I said, now there are open spots available to play with the likes of Logan Couture, Timo Meyer, Tomas Hurdle, Evander Kane, and like, why not put Kevin LeBanc there? They got him on this like super team-friendly 1-year, $1 million deal after a 56-point season. I have no idea why he agreed to that, but either way, now it's time for him to prove himself, and I think the team's going to give him a chance to do it. if he's going to be slated for top 6. Plus, if he could keep that top power play deployment, why not? I feel like Labanc could probably build on his career year that he just had with this 56-point season. Maybe it's time for him to break 60 in year 4 of his career. What do you think?
This could be the year that Kevin breaks Labanc. And we've been waiting for this to happen. Labanc paced for 56 points last season with only 14 minutes of ice per game. So you want to see, okay, well, he's making really efficient use of his minutes. Where does he rank in 5-on-5 points per 60 minutes amongst skaters? Well, he ranks around 60th, which is actually kind of an interesting place to be first. It establishes himself, like if you want to do a quick and dirty top 6 calculation, you've got 6 top 6 players on 31 NHL teams. There's a lot more, right? Like 60th is a pretty good place to be within that framework. And then you look at the players around Labanc in his points per 60 production at even strength. You've got Radulov, Tyler Seguin, Jonathan Toews, Sam Reinhart, Tyler Bertuzzi, who might be another good guy to be thinking of considering this exact stat, Evander Kane, TJ Oshie, all in the same neighborhood. So you have guys of different flavors in there, right? Like you've got some superstars who have the sky's the limit. You've got some guys like TJ Oshie. It's like, yeah, 55 points, sure. And that's good news for Kevin Labanc to be in that kind of company. Also, what he really shone in last year was his time on the top unit. He wasn't on the top unit all season long, but when he got there, he was very efficient in getting points while up on that top power play. He was just outside the top 25 in power play points per 60 minutes. So Kevin Labanc actually had 20 power play points last season with less than a 50% share of his team's power play time, which again, just like scoring 56 points in 14 minutes of ice time, not very common, and yet I don't see anything weird or jarring happening inside either those power play minutes or those 5-on-5 minutes. Things look pretty sustainable for what Kevin Labanc has been doing. And I'm bringing up, of course, these points per 60 metrics just because it feels like we can safely assume he's going to see more than 14 minutes of ice per game next season, right? He's bet on himself, like you said, Elon, or maybe you were talking about Robin Lehner and us, but Kevin Labanc is another guy who did it. If I were him, I would fire my agent unless they have like some secret document where he's been promised something bigger next season. It was very strange. But in any case, the Sharks must feel like they owe him something. And they don't even need to feel that way. He's good. He's a good player. They should want to use him. So with Kevin Labanc getting extra minutes and the assumption that he's going to keep up at least the same rates, which, like I said, looks sustainable to me, Labanc should be a lock to break 60 points, maybe even get 65. I would love a full season on the top power play for him. That's sort of the X factor here. He needs to be on there long enough to at least collect 15 power play points on the season. He can survive without 20, but he's going to need at least 15 to really get a really solid crack at breaking 60.
Okay, that seems fair. And hey, he was getting a lot of top power play time last season, and now Joe Pavelski's gone. So they not only have to replace, if for him to not make it, they'd have to have 2 other guys that get on there instead of him. I guess obviously they could go the 2 defenseman situation sometime. But yeah, I really like Labanc for next season. I feel like he's going to fall in a lot of drafts. That's what we've been seeing in our slow drafts, right? I don't even think he's been taken in a couple of them, or if he has, it's been like super late. So yeah, it'll be really fun to see his slow draft ADP, and then it'll be fun to project him in the almanac. You're saying maybe 65. I wonder if you'll put your money where your mouth is and actually plop down 65 in that spreadsheet. But okay, speaking of the power play, or actually no, speaking of Labanc, one thing I guess that could go against him is I feel like he was pretty good. Like that third line with Thornton, Sorensen, and Labanc, like as we saw, he did really well. So what if they decide we like that third line? But then of course they do have to put someone out there to replace Donskoy and Pavelski. And like, who do they really have to replace these guys? Like Melker, Karlsson. I'm trying to think like Barclay, Gaudreau. Like they have to come up with some names to put there. So I feel like Labanc has to at least get a crack. But okay, speaking of that power play, last season they most often went with either Couture, Hurdle, Labanc, Pavelski, and then one of their defensemen like Karlsson or Burns. And then sometimes they put both D on with Couture, Hurdle, and Pavelski. So either way, we have a spot to fill. And I think the most common name I've been hearing is people that are saying they benefit from all of this is Timo Meyer. And like, oh boy, Timo Meyer is coming off an amazing third season where he put up 30 goals and 66 points in 78 games. That's again, 30 goals and 66 points in 78 games. And that was with like no top power play time. He only had 10 power play points, and he still had such an amazing season. And now if Timo Meyer is going to be the guy to take Pavelski's spot on the top power play unit, what if you turn that 10 power play points into like 25 power play units? That San Jose power play knows how to score some goals. We might be looking at a point per game, maybe higher Timo Meyer. Like this guy already kind of had a breakout, and now I feel like he can have a second breakout. We might be on the precipice of a point per game Timo Meyer season.
I'm just going to turn on the light and then I'll respond to you.
Brian. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Maybe hire Timo Meyer. I love that as Timo's slogan for 2019-2020, except I'm with you, Elon. I feel like it's more a certainly hire for Timo Meyer. There are zero reasons to disbelieve in Meyer's performance last season, as I desperately hope I made clear all the way through the 2018-19 campaign on our show. Meyer pays for 69 points, and like you said, Elon, only 10 of them came on the power play, which we marveled at all season long, pointing out the elite company that Timo Meyer joined by scoring so many points in a season without that top power play production. Meyer ranked 24th in the entire NHL in 5-on-5 points scored. So a full season on the top power play unit should get him into 80-point territory. I agree. I'm in for point per game Timo Meyer, except again, this power play one thing is kind of tough. Like, I don't know it's a guarantee that Meyer gets up there. Maybe San Jose spends more time working with a power play that has only one of Meyer or LeBanc, so that they have both Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns on the top unit, which we saw some playing with last year. We just don't know how they're going to play that top unit. I would love to see both Meyer and LeBanc on the top unit, but then that means Karlsson's not on it. Like, there's so many different configurations, right? So we'll see what they go with. It feels like it could be something that shifts, every 10 games or so. Karlsson, Meyer, or LeBanc get shuffled on or off through the year.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see, but definitely things can't get any worse for Meyer, who was never on the top power play before. So yeah, I think point per game Meyer is going to happen. I think we're going to be taking that swing in the almanac. I'm excited to put that down onto paper. And by paper, I mean a spreadsheet in Google. So, Brian, we talked about Matt Zuccarello before when we were talking about the Stars and how he left. Let's take a look at him now in his new home in Minnesota after signing a 5-year, $30 million contract. Zook is 31 years old. He's coming off his best ever season in terms of point pace. He put up 40 points in 48 games with the Rangers, and then he had only those couple games with the Stars. But overall, 68-point pace for Matt Zuccarello. So fantastic season for him. Before that, he'd been hovering around like a 55 to 62-point pace for the previous 5 seasons. He's been a super consistent fantasy contributor. And then last season, he showed us he may even have ceiling for higher, though now he goes to Minnesota, a team that many in our Patreon Facebook group are like super down on currently. Brian, I believe it was you who wrote saying they're maybe the team that you're least interested in drafting players from. You said something funny, like you were talking to your wife who wasn't even paying attention and telling her that you think Minnesota might be a team that you might want to draft players from. But I don't know, like let me play devil's advocate here, because maybe the Minnesota Wild aren't as bad as people think they are, right? Like they could still potentially fill a top 6 with guys like, Eric Stahl, Koivu, Zach Parise, Jason Zucker. They've got Fiala, who's supposed to be, I don't know. So people have told me before that Kevin Fiala is a good player. He got traded for Granlund. They have Ryan Donato, who we saw a lot of good things from last season. There's Zuccarello himself, right? So you could have 6 of these guys, and it could be a decently talented, top 6. Plus, there are guys like Joel Eriksson-Ek, Jordan Greenway, Nico Sturm. I've heard good things about all these guys. Maybe one of them is going to be ready to take a step forward. And don't forget that Matt Dumba should be healthy next season, and he's someone that we expected to make a big impact last season. He was making a big impact before he got injured. I feel like Dumba being there might, help their power play, might help some players get some more points at even strength. So I wonder if maybe things aren't as bad for Minnesota as people are saying. And if things were to fall right with they'll need their older guys to all stay healthy and not fall off. And I know Stahl already did fall off, and Parise, he was great, but it's tough for him to stay healthy. So yeah, I'm saying it's a lot of ifs, right? And also Fiala, it would help if he finally reaches his potential, if Donato continues to impress. But if all of that happens, perhaps we have some decent line mates at even strength in the top power play for Zuccarello, right? Or is that too many ifs? But yeah, I'm just curious to know if you think there's any chance Zuccarello can continue what he did last season, or are we going back to more like a 55-point kind of ceiling for Zook?
Fans of the Wild, let me do that again. Fans of the Wild surely appreciate your optimism, Elon, but I want to revisit the reasons for your optimism. That Minnesota top 6 that you tried. I know you tried to look at through rose-colored glasses, but I just want to look through them one at a time. First, you have Eric Staal in his age 35 year coming off a bad season that he should bounce back from, but still 35-year-old Eric Staal. Then you mentioned Mikko Koivu, who is going in his age 36 season, who is fragile, seems more or less done, has a 47-point pace over the last 2 seasons. Then you have Zach Parise at 35 years old this year. Fragile, had a great year last year. I think he probably could repeat something similar. So he is a bright spot so long as he can stay healthy. Then you have Jason Zucker, who is clearly not liked by Minnesota by the number of times they tried to trade him. So I expect they'll still give him the best deployment possible. They should want to. If they still want to deal him, give it to him for his trade value, but that just doesn't feel like a warm and fuzzy situation there. And then you've got Kevin Fiala and Ryan Donato, who all sort of lump together and say, yeah, these are 2 guys with promise who I still think could be good hockey players, but they're question marks still at this point. So there's a lot of flags there, and that's the Minnesota top 6 right there. Tons of ifs, and Zuccarello is one of the things about that Minnesota top 6 that is not an if. He's turning 32. I expect him to get a chance to shine, but it's just a very weird situation where I just hope that Zuccarello can meet the standard he's set for himself rather than get real starry-eyed and hope he can beat it. And why I say Zuccarello isn't an if, because I believe that he is a 55, 60-point player. That's who he was when he was playing with Kevin Hayes and Derek Stepan as his centerman. Some success with Mika Zibanejad helped push him above that last year, but I don't think that Eric Staal can rise to be quite that level of centerman for Zuccarello. So I'm just going to say that where Zuccarello had a shot, if he'd stayed put in New York or otherwise had for sure a great centerman to play with on a totally functional team, he could repeat a big year. He could repeat a shot at getting 65 points. But without that, I'm just not sure Zuccarello has the opportunity to outdo himself as a member of the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was trying to be optimistic, but yeah, Ryan in the chat said Minnesota is where the new NHL retirement home is. And that's kind of what it's looking like. I didn't even mention Ryan Suter. Like, it would help if he could still be good. He kind of had a down year last year.
Matt Dumba, you mentioned, great. Like, he's going to have a good season. He's going to be great. He's a fantastic defenseman, has like all the tools. Good for him. Ryan Suter, he had a pretty good year for times last year. I don't think that he's going to get any better, unfortunately. No. And Jared Spurgeon's still there. He's going to be okay. But just up front, it's not the tidiest situation.
Sure. But a lot of the ifs are like health related, right? Like, I feel like there is a chance.
Are they though?
Well, Staal, like Parise, like these are good players. Staal was actually having a really good year last year. His overall numbers aren't good. I'm looking forward to digging into Staal in the Almanac because he started really strong and then fell off. But maybe, that first part is more representative of what he still is able to do. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And but I do think also in terms of if you're looking at Devin Dubnyk, who's probably going to fall in a lot of goalie rankings, we're going to talk about a bunch of goalies in a second. Like, I don't know if Minnesota's like as bad as people think. Like, I would be happy, me,
Devin
Brian.
Dubnyk a reason to think that Minnesota isn't as bad?
No, I'm just saying more like I'd be okay with maybe drafting Devin Dubnyk. Like, I think he's going to fall far enough in drafts that I feel like he might end up being a good value guy to draft over someone like, say, Semyon Varlamov. I don't know if that's a good transition or not, but let's switch over to some goalie talk now because we saw a bunch of teams swap around some starters and backups, and I want to get up to speed on who's on which team. And the New York Islanders didn't get Panarin. They weren't able to re-sign Robin Lehner, so they ended up settling for re-signing Anders Lee, and then they inked Semyon Varlamov to a 4-year, $20 million deal. Varlamov's coming off a down season for him. He put up only a 909 save percentage overall, but really that doesn't even tell the whole story of last season for Varlamov. He actually started great. He had a 926 save percentage in the first quarter of the year and then pretty much completely fell off and eventually lost the starting job to Philip Grubauer by the end. What we expected to be a 1A, 1B situation turned into Grubauer playing 8 games in a row down the stretch to help the Avs get into the playoffs. And then Varlamov rode the bench for the entirety of the series versus Calgary and San Jose. So Varlamov went from being like the starter to a 1A, 1B situation to like a complete backup. And obviously it's not all his fault. Like, Grubauer was insane. Like, obviously they needed to play Grubauer, but yeah, Varlamov obviously doesn't sound too good for him, for a team signing a new goalie to a 4-year deal that's injury prone and has just been relegated to a backup the season before. Still, okay, Varlamov was good when he was healthy in 2017-18. He put up a 920 save percentage, and I guess the Islanders are hoping that that's the Varley that they're going to be getting for the next 4 years. And of course, keep in mind that last season, Thomas Greiss played in 43 games playing tandem with Robin Lehner, and he put up an amazing 920 save. And he put up an amazing 927 save percentage in the process. So, but like, what do you think is going on here? The money Varley is getting makes me think he'll be a starter, but it's probably in the Islanders' best interest to go with a 1A, 1B situation once again, like they did last year. Maybe that is actually what they're planning, because I think that's what makes sense for Varlamov. Like, this guy can't handle a full workload, but maybe it could work out on the Islanders, playing under Barry Trotz on a team that knows how to protect their goalies. Maybe like Varlamov actually could be a good guy to draft here, as long as you're accepting the fact that this guy's not going to be playing like 60 games. Maybe he's going to play similar numbers of games as Robin Leonard did last year.
Well, when the best justification for a signing you're hearing, okay, let me start that over. Varlamov going to the Islanders was a real head scratcher, right? Let's just rewind to when it happened. Everyone was like, well, they let Lehner walk so they could sign Varlamov, and everyone was trying to figure out why. And the best justification that I heard for it was that maybe Varlamov, him signing for the Islanders, can help convince fellow Russian goaltending prospect Ilya Sorokin to actually leave Russia and come play for the team. Like that's the best thing that I could come close to believing or understanding why Varlamov was signed by the Islanders. And if that's the best justification that I could personally get for it, not a great situation. I'm not sure why the Isles would want to invest in a player like Varlamov, who's been inconsistent both in his play and his health, especially when it sounded like the Isles could have kept Lehner had they wanted to make a similar commitment to him. And by the way, they also have Thomas Greiss, who had a fantastic season last year, which I'll get to in a minute. But the first news for the good news for anyone interested in Varlamov is that the Isles do a pretty good job of protecting their goalie. The bad news is that that's not really a market change from what he was getting in Colorado. It's kind of a lateral move that way. So Varlamov could have a good season in Long Island, or he could follow the exact same trajectory as 18-19. Start fine, fall off, lose job. I also want to point out that Varlamov is not walking onto an Isles team that's like, oh yeah, they were a 48-win team last year. That's a great thing for him to be a part of. A big part of that season is now gone. Robin Lehner and his .930 save percentage were almost solely responsible for a handful of those wins. So Varlamov, if he wants to be on a 48-win team, he's going to have to do the same if he wants to get the same results. And I will also throw out there that according to goal saved above average or delta save percentage, Greiss was a better goalie than Varlamov last year and over the 3 years before that. Greiss was actually first in the NHL in goals saved above average per 60 minutes last year. He was second in the whole NHL in 5-on-5 save percentage amongst goalies who'd played at least 30 games, only behind Jordan Binnington. For that matter, you look at the top 6 in 5-on-5 save percentage last year, you've got Greiss, Lehner, and Halak all within the top 6. All goalies that the Islanders, for some reason, were not interested in trusting. Instead, they go out and sign Varlamov, who was tied 29th in 5-on-5 save percentage last year, tied with guys like Brian Elliott, Cam Ward, and Anders Nilsson. So it's a real head scratcher for me what the Islanders are doing here. I don't really want a piece of it. If you're thinking of getting a piece of it, the two things you need to consider when trying to determine whether Varlamov is going to start more than 40 games, it depends on two things. First, if he can be superhuman Varlamov for much of the season, so that guy who plays over and above his head for long stretches. And the second piece is going to be how stubborn the Islanders are going to be about playing him when he isn't the best version of himself, as a guy that they just committed to for 4 years, let maybe the best goaltending performance they've had in decades. I would need to check their numbers, but to let that guy walk, bring in this guy, you wonder just how many times they're going to double down on Varlamov. So that's another factor on whether he plays more than 40 games. And then, of course, there's the health situation, too. I don't know. He's someone that I wouldn't be excited at all to draft. Like, I'd be looking at him as one part of a tandem, and I'd be looking at Greiss, hoping that someone takes Varlamov, and then I can just start Greiss whenever I know he's going to get a game in.
Yeah, well, Ryan is saying, like, maybe the value in Varlamov is you handcuff him and you get the tandem on the Islanders. And we've been toying around with this idea in drafting strategy. Maybe you grab a tandem, especially if you think it's going to start a tandem and then one goalie is going to earn the job. And kind of then you could drop one of the goalies and then you basically have a starter that you drafted late in a draft because people thought they'd be a tandem. It sounds like you're saying that you think that Greiss is going to end up. Is this going to be another Halak prediction from last year where you boldly said that you thought Halak would steal the job from Rask, and you were right for a bit, but then in the end, it didn't work out completely. Are you going to say that again now that you think Greiss is going to steal the job from Varlamov, or do you think they're going to be stubborn, like you say? Like, I don't think they will be. Like, the Islanders, they're still going for the playoffs, right? Like, they're probably going to play the goal that they think is best. And to be fair, like, Varlamov started last season strong. He has shown, like you said, that he can be superhuman Varlamov, or at least a pretty good Varlamov every once in a while for stretches of games. Maybe they just will do what they did last year. Maybe both goalies can be decent. But yeah, which one would you pick if you could only have one? Sounds like you're saying Greiss, but let's say, I think you said that more because you were saying you assume Varlamov's going to get picked first. But let's say you're picking an Islanders goalie now. You could have either. You can't wait. Which one would you take?
Man, if I want numbers, like I'm talking save percentage or goals against average, if your league counts that, I want Greiss. If I'm looking for save volume, I'm going to go Semyon Varlamov. I do think the Isles are going to be somewhat stubborn about keeping him in net as often as they can.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to have to make an actual decision, taking everything into account when we do our almanac.
Okay, so you're asking me who I want first. I will take, like in a draft, I'll take Varlamov because I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of interest in Greiss, and I'll be able to swap out whenever I can. Whereas if I did it the other way around and took Greiss, I think someone else would jump on Varlamov.
Yeah. Also, by the way, like Ryan again saying in the chat, like he had the Greiss-Leonard combo in his league last year that got him to second place. Like that was a really great tandem to own. So who knows? Maybe it could be again, except replacing Robin Leonard with Semyon Varlamov. Who knows? But yeah, there's a lot of concerns with him. Next up, how about we take a look at who Varlamov is replacing in Robin Leonard, who decided to bet on himself. Like we said, he took a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Chicago Blackhawks. The reason why we say bet on himself, right, is because he probably could have gotten a longer term deal and not have to prove everything next year. But I guess he thought that if he has a great year next year, he'll be able to get a better long-term deal next year in free agency. But Leonard, of course, he's going to have his work cut out for him, right? He's coming off this amazing, resurgent Vezina nominated season where he went 25, 13, and 5. He had a 213 goals against average and 930 save percentage, just like unbelievable numbers. And first off, let me just say, I love this move for the Blackhawks, right? Like they clearly needed another goalie to help take the load off of Corey Crawford, who has been having a rough time with head injuries and only managed a 908 save percentage in the 39 games he played last season. Clearly, they weren't ready to put all their hopes on like Colin Delia if Crawford gets hurt, as they try to once again get back into the playoffs after a rough season. But as far as the fantasy impact goes, Leonard goes from one of the best defensive teams to maybe one of the worst. So that can be great for his fantasy value. Of course, on the other hand, I'm expecting Chicago to score more goals next season than the Islanders, so perhaps the worst defensive support can be made up for by more run support. Also, so, I don't know, depending, maybe you could get more wins from having more goals, but that does still require Robin Leonard to be able to stop pucks. And hey, maybe the Chicago D could be a little better after acquiring Calvin DeHaan and Oli Mata during the offseason. I don't know if that's a big deal. Maybe that'll shore things up a little bit. So, okay, to summarize, I guess the two big questions that I have for you that I want you to tackle are like, A, how far do you expect Leonard's save percentage to fall next season now that he goes from the Islanders to the Blackhawks? And B, do you see this as another tandem situation for him, or is he expected to be the starter with Crawford backing up? Like Corey Crawford, I think, is healthy, so they're going to next season with two. Crawford used to be this like amazing goalie, top 5 in the league maybe, and Robin Leonard just came off a Vezina nominated season. So I'm curious to know what you think about the situation over in Chicago.
Okay, so to answer your question about how far I expect Leonard's save percentage to fall next season, I've got to add some context, right? First off, I already mentioned Leonard was 5th in the league in 5-on-5 save percentage last year. He was in a similar ranking for goals saved above average per 60 minutes, but is going to have his work cut out for him. And both of those things are like him, also the team he plays for, right? I wish I could start this over. Let me start that over.
You can, Brian. You have the ability.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so to answer your question about how far I expect Leonard's save percentage to fall next season, got to give some context. Some of it which you already provided, Elon, but I'm going to quantify it a bit more closely. Leonard definitely has his work cut out for him going to Chicago, which is a tough place to go to bet on yourself because, as you sort of suggested, Chicago was the absolute worst team in the league last season in 5-on-5 expected goals against. They were ranked 26th in the league in shot attempts against per 60 minutes. Only Ottawa gave up more shots against, period, than Chicago. And that's not a place you want to find yourself. Now, you look at Lehner himself. He had a great season. He was 5th in the league in 5-on-5 save percentage, similarly ranked in goals saved above average. But these traits of the team he's going to are going to negatively impact him. And you're onto something a little bit, Elon, that adding Olli Mata and Calvin DeHaan and sending out Gustav Forsling and Henri Jokiharju is probably a step towards improving Chicago's defensive situation, but Leonard is still going to have to work substantially harder to earn his save percentage in Chicago than he had to in Long Island last year, which is not a disservice at all to what he did for the New York Islanders. I'm only saying that it's going to be greater difficulty. It's like if goaltending is NBA Jam with rookie, veteran, all-star, and legend difficulty levels, the Islanders would be like the second one. They'd be veteran, but by going to Chicago, Robin Lehner is ratcheting the difficulty all the way up to legend. So that's the sort of game he has to play this year. And I believe in Lehner. Remember, he had a .920 save percentage 2 seasons before last. I wouldn't have expected him to even repeat the .930 in Long Island. So I'm hoping for like a slightly above average, league average save percentage in Chicago. He proved last year that he can outperform your average NHL goalie no matter what sort of shots are thrown at him. So I still expect him to, but Chicago has to at least protect him in an average way for him to then beat the average save percentage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess you're saying that Chicago has to help him to be good, and he has to help Chicago by being good. It's probably going to be a bit of a symbiotic relationship.
Right. Like if he's going to play above what an average NHL goalie would do, the baseline for that is still dependent on how well Chicago protects him, right? So if they protect him and like his expected save, the expected save percentage of an average goalie would be 900, then I'd be like, yeah, give Robin Lehner like a 907. Maybe, but if Chicago gives him much better protection and it's like around league average and he's able, an average goalie would be able to get 915. At that point, Robin Lehner would be able to get a 920. So last year, Chicago not very good at protecting their goalie. This year, they seem to have taken some positive steps in the right direction, although it's still a pretty thin sort of defensive situation there. So I don't love it for Robin Lehner. I would just like him to be league average next year is what I'm hoping for.
I mean, Brian, to be fair, like you're looking at just last season and seeing bad numbers. Don't forget that before last season, Corey Crawford was putting up 929, 918, 924, 924 save percentage. Like Corey Crawford, until last season, was putting up great numbers on Chicago. So unless you're saying just the whole defense was overhauled and is now terrible after one season, like, it is possible that they'll just get better. And like I said, they have brought in some reinforcements in DeHaan and Mata. So, I'm not going to be all doom and gloom. Like I do think that Chicago actually could be a team that people might be sleeping on a bit for next season. Because if Lehner is at least close to as good or somewhat as good as he was last year, maybe their defense isn't as bad as people think it is. I'm not saying it's good. Maybe it's not like as bad. And I think, obviously their offense has a lot of people to be excited about. So I don't know. We'll see. Obviously this is a big question mark. Lehner going there is a big shakeup. But I kind of like his chances. And more specifically, I like Chicago for next year to do a lot better.
Yeah, so I think you're sort of right to be looking at how well Corey Crawford did, 918, 925, 924. And all those years, Corey Crawford did have to outperform. Like, Corey Crawford, we've said on the show for a while, is a really good goalie. Like, he can perform the average NHL goalie. So, yeah, if Lehner can come back and do the same thing, then maybe he can get, like, 918, 920 territory. I'd like to think that Chicago has rebuilt their defense a little, although they did have some pretty significant departures in those couple years that Crawford just had to stand more and more on his head. And I don't think that's fair to ask. Like when a goalie puts up a 929 season, we're not like, oh yeah, no problem, 929 again. The only goalie I think we felt comfortable saying that about, maybe there are two, Henrik Lundqvist and Carey Price, and that's about it. I don't know if Robin Lehner has quite reached that stratosphere yet.
Yeah, and no one's saying he's going to get 929, but you're saying like, oh, but Corey Crawford is really good. Like that's not fair. Like, I mean, they brought in Robin Lehner for a reason because he was nominated for the Vezina Trophy because they think he's really good. So obviously he has to pull off his end of the bargain. Maybe he could get like a 918, like a 920 save percentage. All of a sudden, Chicago's a whole different team if they could get that kind of goaltending numbers. Anyway, okay, since we're on Chicago, they also made a few trades during the offseason. They've been busy. They traded Dominic Cahoon for Olli Mata. They got injured Calvin DeHaan, so we've already mentioned these guys. They got Andrew Shaw from the Habs for a couple picks. I guess they're taking a swing, hoping to get Dylan Strome 2.0 when they sent Henri Jokiharju to the Sabres for Alex Nylander. They also recently traded Artem Anisimov to the Sens for Zach Smith. So of all these new players that are coming into Chicago next season, is there any of them that's on your radar at all that you expect might have some sort of fantasy impact? Like at the end of last season, just for context, The Hawks were rolling lines of like Kane, Taves, and Kajula, and then Strome with DeBrincat and Brendan Perlini. So seems like though maybe one of those like Kajula or Perlini spots could be taken by someone like, say, an Andrew Shaw, who had a career high 47 points last season for the Habs. And oh, by the way, that was in 63 games. That was a 61 point pace season for Andrew Shaw, an amazing season. And if he could either get on the line with like Kane and Taves or on the line with Strome and DeBrincat, that could be really great for Andrew Shaw. Maybe he is, though, at least to me, he's the one of all of these guys that I could see potentially being a really good sleeper, especially like in a Bangers league, because he also helps you with some peripherals.
Yeah, he does there. To me, it's weird that Chicago reacquired Andrew Shaw. He had a great portion of his season last year, but unsustainable variance behind it. And I feel like Chicago is going to remember pretty quickly why they let Andrew Shaw go in the first place. In fact, I would rather take a look at someone like Dylan Sikora, who we're excited about coming into this last season and maybe thinking that he'll get a fresh chance at making an impact in the top 6. I think that's more likely than Andrew Shaw succeeding.
Wow, that's like a bold thing to say after Shaw just put up a 61-point pace in Montreal. Like, obviously, he was still capable if he was put in the right situation of doing well. And I feel like if Drake Kajula was playing with Taves and Kane last season, I don't see why Andrew Shaw can't be at least as good as Kajula. But shots fired at Andrew Shaw.
Yeah, call that a hot take, I guess.
So what do you think you're going to put down? I'm going to bring Andrew Shaw up in the almanac, and you're going to have to pick a number. Are you going to be like 30? Like, how low are you going to go for him?
I don't know. I think I'd probably go. Well, let me take a look here.
Okay, I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on Andrew Shaw.
No, give me 10 seconds here. I just want to see. I remind myself what he was at before last year. Yeah, 20 points in 51 games. The season before, 29 points in 68 games. The year before, 30. Like, he's been a 30, 35 point guy. So yeah, I'm going to say like maybe 35, 40 points. I think last year he ended up in a situation with, remember him, Domi, and Duran were just ripping it up to start the season, right? And there were unsustainable numbers behind all of it. And we pointed out that when last bit, I think Shaw was the one who probably was benefiting the most out of those three. At a really high IPP, his shooting percentage was sky high, highest of his career. He actually was getting like better chances. So give him credit for that, but I'm not sure he's going to get that kind of even strength deployment again.
I mean, like I said, there's options, right? Like, it's not as if Chicago is exploding with top 6 talent after Kane, Taves, Strome, and DeBrincat. So I guess they have Brandon Saad. He never even gets mentioned in this conversation anymore.
I almost mentioned him, but I thought better of it.
Yeah. They have Kirby Doc. Maybe he can make the team and get at the top 6. Who knows? Okay, so just wanted to throw him out there. Maybe he's a guy you could draft, again, like in a last round or put on your watch list. And if he happens to be on a good line, you could stream him in. And also, he's not going to play the whole season, right? He's going to get injured. So, you just want to have him while he's healthy, and maybe you throw him in your IR when he's injured or whatever. Okay, next, let's go to look at the Western Canada. So Calgary and Edmonton played the Western Conference versions of the Sens and Leafs by taking players that the other team didn't want, namely in Cam Talbot and Mike Smith. They just traded their starting goalies. It's so weird. I've never seen that happen before. Or maybe I have. Let us know on Twitter at Keeping Karlsson or in the chat room here if you could think of another pair of teams that swapped their goalies at the end of a season. And they didn't even trade them, right? It was just both UFAs. Okay, let's start with Cam Talbot, who goes to Calgary. He's going to join Big Save Dave Riddick to battle for starts. Talbot is coming off a dreadful season. He put up a terrible, I want to think of more adjectives here, a disgusting 893 save percentage with the Oilers. He ended up losing his starting job to Mikko Koskinen, probably because Talbot was so bad. That's why the Oilers ended up paying all this money for Mikko Koskinen, because he actually had a couple good games in a row and they decided, okay, he's worth getting a bit. So it's all Talbot's fault that the Oilers are stuck with Koskinen now. Then Talbot got traded to Philly, where he was equally bad in the 4 games he got there. And this had followed up, by the way, a disappointing 2007-18 season where Talbot had a 908 save percentage, but that actually followed 4 straight seasons of Talbot being a good goalie. Like, for the first part of his career as a backup on the Rangers and then as a starter on the Oilers, he was looking pretty good. Like, he was looking like a 917 plus save percentage goalie, including that amazing 2016-17 season where he had a 919 save percentage in 73 games played. He played 73 games and was able to maintain such a high save percentage, got the Oilers into the playoffs. So he has shown us that he can be good. But like, what happened to him? Like, clearly he struggled, but would it be fair, Brian, for me to put some of the blames on the Oilers just being a terrible team? Like, I wonder if we could almost remember when Devin Dubnyk was like, we thought he was good, and then all of a sudden he went to the Oilers, or no, I think he was on the Oilers, and then he started doing badly there, and then he got shipped away, and everyone thought, oh, this guy's not good anymore. But it turned out maybe it was just the Oilers sucked. And then when Dubnyk got to Minnesota, it was a great situation for him, and he flourished. maybe the same could be said for Cam Talbot, especially because I kind of have a hunch that Calgary doesn't want David Rittich to be their number one goalie. Like, they had the option to make him their number one goalie going to the playoffs last year, but he wasn't the one. Like Mike Smith, who wasn't doing that well, he ended up stealing that number one job. And, Rittich didn't have a great year. He had a .911 save percentage overall. He obviously had some good stretches, but he ended up riding the bench during the Flames' short playoff run. They did sign Rittich to a 2-year, $5.5 million contract today. So I'm not sure if that signifies anything one way or another. It's not like a huge money deal. So I wonder if maybe Cam Talbot could end up being a bit of a draft steal next season, because if he could even be average, and if he's the starting goalie on Calgary, like, don't forget, Calgary is one of the top teams in the league. If you could get a goalie that might be the starting goalie on one of the top teams, that could end up being like a top 15 value fantasy goalie, right? And he's someone that you're probably going to get a lot later than the 15th goalie drafted. So I definitely have my eye on Cam Talbot. Of all these goalies that got moved around, I don't know. I feel like there's a good chance that Talbot could end up being the diamond in the rough here.
Well, Elon, I'm really glad you talked so much about what could Cam Talbot do if he wasn't with Edmonton, how much of it was Edmonton's fault and how much of it was Cam Talbot's fault. There is a measure for that. It's called goals saved above average. You can use it as a rate stat, goals saved above average per 60 minutes. It's also not the first. It's probably like the 9th time I've mentioned it on this show alone.
Right. I watch the games, so I don't need to know these numbers.
Anyway, so Cam Talbot, even accounting for the difficulty of shots that he was facing in Edmonton, still performed below the level of an average NHL goalie. But you're right, that hasn't been the story of his whole career. Like, on the whole, I see Cam Talbot as an average goalie who played, a fair amount below average last season. But in each of the last 4 seasons, Cam Talbot, I'm calling him average. He's had some good years, but none of them have actually been average. In 3 of them, Cam Talbot has either been a fair deal above or below average, but that's all washed out to a picture that leads me to expect Cam Talbot to be around league average in his save percentage, plus or minus, depending on the protection he's getting from the team in front of him. And this season in Calgary, hopefully, that's a plus. You're onto something, Elon, that at least Calgary takes better care of their goalie than Edmonton does. Calgary was in the top third of the league last year in protecting their net. Edmonton was in the bottom third of the league last year. So I think Talbot could hold his own and be a great deep goalie pick, the same way I thought Mike Smith would be last year. So personally, I'm a little more afraid than you seem to be to get back on that ride again, especially with David Rittich being a backup who's capable of inching into a 1B, then 1A, or straight up number 1 territory if his tandem mate leaves the door open wide enough. Like, I'm not sleeping on David Rittich either. A lot of people really regretted not getting him before their competition did last year. Like, I could see Rittich being at least as valuable as he was last year. He's one of the better goalies by the metric of goal saved above average per 60 minutes. I imagine what the Flames are going to do is they're going to let one of the 2 guys, Talbot or Rittich, earn it out of camp in a more or less open competition. They're not terribly committed to either one. Rittich, I think, just signed a arbitration deal. You mentioned it. Cam Talbot is just signed for this year only. So they don't need to deeply invest in one or the other, right? They can figure out which is their guy and then ride him. But Cam Talbot has a decent chance of being that guy. The only rub is I think Rittich has an equal chance of being the guy.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, Calgary isn't going to do any of these games of playing a goalie just because they're committed to them. Like, they need to go for the cup, right? Like, this is their window. They're a good team right now. Mark Giordano's not getting any younger. So they're going to go with whoever earns it. And I think it's you throw the coin in the air. All I know is that David Rittich couldn't handle the job last year. Maybe he will be able to this year. We've been talking a lot about tandems, right? And I guess we will have to decide what's the better strategy. Do you just grab a couple goalies from different teams that are in tandems and hope to get lucky? What if you grab Talbot and Thomas Greiss, and all of a sudden you have 2 starters? That's a lot better than having a tandem, but also you can end up with 2 backups. So it's a tough to decide each way. But Brian, who would you rather have? If you were taking a tandem, would you rather take the Calgary tandem or the Islanders tandem? Because I feel like the Islanders tandem is going to be the one that goes first, because Varlamov and Greiss are sort of bigger names at this point than Talbot and Rittich. But Calgary is a better team. So I feel like I'd almost rather have the Calgary tandem, unless you just think the goalies are too crappy.
I will also take the Calgary tandem too. I think probably Greiss is the best goalie of the bunch, but I like what Calgary is going to be able to offer their goalie a little more than what the Islanders are going to be able to offer theirs.
Yeah, maybe it's a decision of, do you want to have more wins or do you want to have better save percentage? Because I would think that probably, well, if last season was any indication, then the Islanders goalies would have better save percentage. But of course, Varlamov might not be as good as Robin Lehner, as we've discussed. Okay, over to the Oilers. So now they've got a tandem themselves of Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen. I feel like both of these guys are pretty similar to me. They've both shown themselves to be capable of being good for stretches, but neither gives me much confidence that they can be consistently good for a long stretch, especially not for a full season, and especially on the Edmonton Oilers. Koskinen ended last season with a .906 save percentage in 55 games. Smith had an .898 save percentage in 42 games, but to Mike Smith's credit, he was higher than .910 save percentage in the second half. Like I said, he stole the job from Riddick. He was actually really great in the playoffs. Calgary had no reason to blame Mike Smith for losing. It was because of other reasons. They couldn't score enough goals. I see this as maybe the tandemist tandem in the league. Like, I really just don't see any scenario where either of these guys becomes the starting goalie and plays like a ton of games. I think Edmonton's going to have to just jump back and forth between the two of them. All I know is I don't really want to draft either of these guys. I'm like totally not into the Oilers at all for next season. You look at their players that they have aside from their big three, obviously McDavid, RNH, and Draisaitl. It's like, ugh, like not great. So yeah, I would stay away. This is my least favorite tandem, I think, maybe in the league, or maybe we could like consider Ottawa in that conversation. But yeah, maybe are you higher by any chance on Mike Smith or Koskinen being worth drafting next season?
No, I'm not. Like, it's funny. You've got the Calgary tandem, and it's like, oh, yeah, both these guys could potentially be number one. And in Edmonton, it's like, oh, neither of these guys could probably be a number one. It was very Oilers to create a goalie problem by signing Koskinen and then try to solve it by acquiring another goalie problem in Mike Smith, which is actually good news for Mikko Koskinen. Mike Smith is probably one of the handful of possible goalie acquisitions that Koskinen could actually outplay. So yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be very tandem-y in Edmonton, except I don't trust either one. Definitely not as much as I trust either of the guys in Calgary. Like, I honestly feel like we have remember Andrei Pavelski?
Of course, on the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, I feel like Edmonton essentially has two Andrei Pavelskis. These are two guys who will fool you for a couple weeks into thinking, oh man, still got it. And then they will crash and burn the rest of the way. So I would stay pretty far away from the Edmonton tandems.
But I remember, wasn't there a season when at the start you like had read some article and you were convinced that actually Pavelski is good? Like, and
yeah, it was right before he retired. So we never got to find out.
Yeah, sure.
I think that was in the early days of goals saved above average, and former Keeping Karlsson guest Nick Mercadante, I think, was one of the people who was touting this theory as well, that Pavelski was better than we all thought, that he just had a rough go of it in the teams he was playing behind.
Yeah, I guess I'd love to get Nick Mercadante back. He was a good guest. He knows a lot about goalies. Okay, since we're on the Oilers and Flames, I guess let's take a second to talk about their huge blockbuster trade where they swapped Milan Lucic and James Neal. And so first of all, my initial thought is that Lucic will play in the bottom six in Calgary and will continue to have zero fantasy value. So I don't know if there's anything to say about Milan Lucic. But James Neal, on the other hand, he interests me because, yeah, he was a huge disappointment last season. He only had 19 points in 63 games. But before that, he was around a 50-point guy with Vegas and Nashville before that for a few seasons. And maybe he still has some of that left. Plus, and I think this is the one big plus, the Oilers are just so shallow. Like I said, after McDavid, Draisaitl, and Ryan... So shallow after McDavid, Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Like, to get a line one, power play one spot and play with like McDavid and Draisaitl, or at least like on line two with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, all James Neal has to do is beat out the likes of like Alex Chiasson, Colby Cave, Marcus Granlund, Jujhar Khaira, Joakim Nygaard, Zach Cassian, Josh Archibald, Sam Gagner. Like, these are like, I know it sounds like I'm just naming a bunch of fourth liners, but this
sounds like you're making up names.
Like, I just feel like James Neal is better than all these guys, right? So maybe the Oilers end up slotting Neal in on line one with McDavid and Draisaitl, and also on power play one. And so if like a guy who has shown that he could be like a 50-point guy just a couple seasons ago, if he's with those guys, I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it'll last all season, and I'm not saying that I would like bet a lot of money on it, but James Neal is someone I'd be very happy to draft late in drafts. Like last year, people were going too insane about Ty Ratty, right? Like we saw that Ty Ratty was going to be playing with McDavid, and then people were taking him like super high. I don't think that'll happen. I think people have learned their lesson. But James Neal, if he's available to me at the end of a draft, I'll take him for sure, just for the shot. And obviously, we'll see in training camp what the Oilers actually do with all their guys. I guess they also have Puljujärvi, maybe, and Yamamoto. So like there is some competition, but like it could be a good spot for James Neal. Maybe the best spot he's seen since his Pittsburgh days. And so yeah, for that reason, I think he's worth throwing a late pick. What do you think?
So it's not that I don't agree with you. I'm just gonna say that we had this conversation last year, except in place of James Neal, we were saying Ty Ratty, and he had a similarly uncompetitive group of forwards to beat, and he didn't. Right? He lost his spot pretty quickly after not doing much with it. And I'm actually...
To be fair, I think he got injured, right? Like, I think maybe things could have been a little different for him if he could have stayed healthy. But yeah, the lessons learned. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, James Neal is not so interesting to me above someone like Ty Ratty. He's actually less interesting than me because Ty Ratty had this like unknown upside quality to him. James Neal feels like we know where he's going. He's definitely a player in decline. There's no doubt about that. But to be fair to Neal, like Milan Lucic, he got even worse than he deserved last year. So it was a bad year, but his numbers were even worse than they should have been, even given how bad he played. But remember, even in what was considered for James Neal a successful season in Vegas the year before last, in that season, when he scored 25 goals, he still only paced for 51 points. And now he's 2 years older than he was then. So I do see your optimism in James Neal. All that said, maybe he plays with McDavid. That could work. Maybe he plays 17 minutes a game again instead of just 15. And that would be a reason to take a chance on James Neal. I'm not going to write him off entirely, but you are like starting to get wistful about Neal's days in Pittsburgh. But let's remember that those were exactly his prime years, age 23 to 26. And then he became a 50-point guy almost the instant that he went to Nashville. So James Neal is not a bet I'd want to make. In a deep league, sure. Like if you're at that point in the draft where you're taking flyers, sure, why not? And then, it's non-committal. You're not passing up anyone else you're more interested in. The same way that you might want to try drafting Zach Kassian at the end of your draft, or Alex Chiasson, or maybe even Jesse Puljujarvi. But for me, I think I'd actually rather Kassian than James Neal. Would you? Or are you taking Neal? And then I want to ask you a follow-up.
Okay, I guess the thing is Kassian has those peripherals. Obviously, we'll learn a lot in training camp. I don't like drafting too early because I like to see these things. I think I'd take a shot on Neal just because Neal has shown us some offensive upside as recently as 2 seasons ago. So I'd take him. But yeah, definitely I agree with you. Like, I'm not drafting Neal in a way where I'm like, this guy might be on my lineup all season and like a core guy. This is like a guy, it's basically like I'm streaming right at the draft and then I'm ready to cut bait as soon as he's off that top line, which might be right away. But the upside is there. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, so, okay, what's your follow-up?
Well, knowing this is probably true about James Neal and this other player I'm going to throw at you, who would you draft between James Neal and Corey Perry?
Neal. Yeah.
Really? Okay, I would take Perry for sure.
Ugh, you love... Okay, first of all, Corey Perry has no chance of getting on the top power play.
You're right. There's no upside there. Maybe that's dumb. I would take... I'm going for the higher floor, I guess.
But as your last pick in a draft, you're going for high floor? Why? You'll just drop the player if they suck.
Yeah.
But if he's on top line, top power play... It's huge. That's not going to happen for Corey Perry.
I already see the error in my ways. I thought it was really easy actually to choose Corey Perry, but now I'm having second thoughts.
Honestly, like I feel like Corey Perry's done. Like I get your optimism, but
he's the Jason Spezza of 1920, right? He's a Dallas Star. And I'm like, oh yeah, finally. Like a couple contextual factors have changed for the better for him. Now he's going to be okay, and it won't happen. Yeah, so I'm totally open to that possibility. I believe that he's going to be okay, but probably not someone you need to take a flyer on. Like he'll be available in a couple weeks, even if he does half decent in his first handful of games in Dallas. Whereas James Neal, if he plays with McDavid and has points in his first 3 games, he's gone.
Oh yeah, for sure. You grab him. So okay, we're on the same page. You're a guy. You love your like older players who might still have something left. Jason, are you into Jason Spezza on the league by any chance? No. Okay.
No, I think it's beautiful that he's landing in Toronto to potentially finish his career. I think it's a good fit for player and team. But no, I'm not expecting much. It's like Tyler Ennis last year, right?
Yeah, now Tyler Ennis is on the Sens. So it's kind of funny how this all works out. The Leafs, I like what the Leafs do, though. They sort of spend all their money on their top players, and then they've got like these cheap guys who, Jason Spezza as a 4th line center. That's pretty good. I don't mind that.
I'll take it.
All right. So let's go to Buffalo.
He would be like, how much better is he than Ottawa's first line center?
So who's Ottawa's first line center? Anyway? Like Artem Anisimov, Colin White, like JS, not JS Giguère,
Pajot, Tierney. It's a mess. It's a disaster.
Yeah, maybe Spezza could crack the top line in Ottawa.
Not a doubt about it.
And he'd be 4th line in Toronto. That's sad. Okay. I would definitely want to stop in Buffalo. I think they've had a low-key fantastic offseason, and especially if you include like sort of the end of last season, which was basically an offseason for them since they had nothing to play for when they got Brandon Montour. Like I love what they've done for this team. So obviously their biggest splash came when they extended Jeff Skinner. We've already talked about that a couple episodes ago. But check out what else Buffalo pulled off. They acquired Colin Miller from Vegas for picks. They got Jimmy Vesey from the Rangers for a third. They signed Marcus Johansen as a UFA to a 2-year contract. They made that trade of sending away Alex Nylander for Henry Jokiharju, who's supposed to be a high upside defenseman prospect. And then, if you include that trade with Anaheim for Brandon Montour at the end of the season, the Sabres have like totally overhauled, especially their defense, right? All of a sudden, we're looking at like Dahlin, Ristolainen for as long as he's there, Montour, Miller, Jokiharju, and then they still have Zach Bogosian. Like, this is not a bad-looking decor for a team that I feel like going into last season, we're like, this team is terrible. Like, their defense is terrible. They have no good players aside from Dahlin and Ristolainen. Now, all of a sudden, it looks like they have like a decent-looking decor, and I'm curious to know, like, would you draft anyone from that group? Like, obviously you're drafting Dahlin or Ristolainen, and I'm looking forward to drooling all over Rasmus Dahlin when we do our almanac, and also to discussing Ristolainen and what he still has left for us. But like, what do you think about like a Brandon Montour? Can he still hit that upside that we were expecting back in Anaheim? Can Colin Miller repeat his 41-point pace from a couple seasons ago? Like, are there any of these defensemen on Buffalo aside from the Rasmusi that you're interested in looking at for drafting next season?
First off, I think it's Razmai. And then to answer your question about the defenseman, no, I'm not getting any more into them. You're right that Buffalo has had a low-key good offseason, rebuilding a decor that needed it, and on the cheap too. But when you're looking at these guys switching teams, the thinking would be that someone like Brandon Montour would get a bump in deployment in Buffalo. They need him more, but he actually lost about a minute of ice per game in the 20 games he played for Buffalo towards the end of the season. So I feel like it might be a similar deal for Colin Miller, right? Unless he ends up on the top pair, can get minutes above and beyond the 19 and a half he averaged in Vegas the last couple of years, I can't expect Colin Miller to break through in any new way. And even repeating 41 points would be difficult because that season where he got 41 points, he had 17 power play points to help get him there. And I just can't see a scenario where he's likely to collect those power play points in Buffalo unless Dahlin gets hurt and Miller is the guy who gets promoted to the top unit.
Yeah, okay, I guess it's all fair. I actually kind of like Brandon Montour a little bit. He did have, like you said, his minutes went down when he got to Buffalo, but he did have, I think, 10 points in 20 games. It's like a 41-point pace. Like, I feel like he could maybe be like a 40-point defenseman if things break right for him. I'm not expecting like a lot of power play time, but he could get a lot of even strength time. So Brandon Montour might be a guy I would take late because defensemen, are so hard to get. We've been doing our slow drafts, and Brandon Montour has been slowly trickling to the top of the available players when you're ranking by last season, just because so many defensemen get taken. Like in the Cupful, we do 14 team leagues, and each team has like 4 D spots. Plus, you might want to use one of your bench spots on a defense. Am I saying goalie or defense? I don't know what I'm doing. It's late, Brian, but you know what I'm saying. A lot of defensemen get drafted, and all of a sudden, someone who might be able to get you 40 points could be pretty interesting. And I guess we could discuss in the future. Maybe I could try to convince you that Brandon Montour might be a little better than what you're saying. Like, I just still remember when everyone thought he was going to be so good. Is that like totally over now? Like, people were falling all over themselves to trade for Montour or to draft him a couple seasons ago. Everyone thought he was the heir apparent to take over on the top power play in Anaheim.
Yeah, and that upside is still there, except Buffalo is closed, right? You've got Dahlin, and if you want Montour to have a meaningful impact, you want him to get up on that top pairing. He's not going to get power play time, so maybe he does get up on that top pairing and plays enough minutes to become a little more fantasy relevant, but it's the Dahlin show from now until the end of Montour's career if he's in Buffalo for the entirety of it.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not talking about like 50-point Brandon Montour, but I feel like he could be 40-point Montour, not on the top power play. Like on the second power play, give him 8 to 10 power play points, and then 20 plus minutes of even strength time. There's something there maybe, but okay, let's talk about Marcus Johansen, who comes into the picture. I can definitely see a scenario where I'm assuming they're bringing him in to be the second line right winger alongside Casey Middlestad as the center, and then say like Connor Sherry or Jimmy Vesey or maybe even like Okposo. I don't know. Like they have other guys, but I feel like they brought Marcus Johansen in to try him on the second line. Maybe even Victor Olofsson is someone who's showed us glimpses of a potential future. So maybe he could crack the top 6. But I do think Johansen will be there. And I guess my question now is that worth anything to you? Like last year, we joked around at some points in the season how Johansen was such an obvious on New Jersey, like an obvious like 45-ish point guy. Like you project it, he's going to hit it because he's not great. He's not terrible. Is it kind of similar in Buffalo? Because like another thing I guess is there kind of is an open spot on that top power play, right? Like for sure, there's going to be Skinner. Eichel, and Reinhart, and Dahlin. Then there's going to be a fourth forward, and who is it going to be? Like Okposo, Middlestat, Olofsson. Like I think it very well could be Marcus Johansson, and if that happens, then all of a sudden maybe he's not just a 45-point guy. Maybe he's closer to a 55-point guy. He did hit 58 points in 2016-17 with Washington, and he's paced for around like 40 in the last couple of seasons in New Jersey and Boston, but he's struggled so much with injuries, so I don't even know how much that's worth. So yeah, where do you think we're going to end up projecting Marcus Johansson next season going to the Buffalo Sabres?
It's optimistic that Marcus Johansson is going to end up on the top power play. Washington used him there, right? A few years over someone like Andrei Burakovsky. We were always trying to figure out who the fourth forward was going to be there. But then when Johansson went to New Jersey, he wasn't used on the top power play. Boston did every so often after acquiring him at the deadline. And there's certainly room for Johansson to be on the top power play in Buffalo. But even with that, I don't think he gets past being super optimistically a 55-point guy. Marcus Johansson has only paced above 50 points 3 times in his career. The first time was a season where he only played 34 games, so I don't know if he would have been able to maintain that pace had he played another 50. Another time was a season where he scored on 20% of his shots, and the third time was when Johansson had a 51-point season that did look about right. So I think that's probably the best case scenario, 51 points for Marcus Johansson, even with top power play time, especially when on the second line in Buffalo at even strength, there's not a whole lot to work with, right? So I'd still have him probably at 45 points, but if he does get on that top power play unit, I'd be happy to give him 50.
Yeah, I mean, Cam Robinson says that we shouldn't give up on Casey Middlestat just yet. So maybe there is still a good centerman on that second line that we're just waiting to break out. But yeah, probably I'll end up going around 50. Maybe, break the shackles and go to 53 points or something. We're in the almanac this year. We're not doing the rounding, we've decided. So we're going to be able to give you guys exact projections. And so maybe I could see myself inching up to 52, 53 for Marcus Johansson if I want to really play on the wild side here. Finally, if Buffalo all of a sudden has a decent defensive depth, like I was saying, then... Oh, wait, sorry, let me say this again. I said talk too slow. Finally, if I'm right that Buffalo all of a sudden has decent D-depth to go along with their high-end top-line scorers, do you think there's a chance that this will finally be the year that you want to own a Buffalo goalie? And if so, which one? That's the problem. It's like finally Buffalo looks like they'll have good defense. Maybe you'll want their starting goalie, but unfortunately we have no idea who that's going to be. Carter Hutton was signed at the start of last season. He started strong, actually, but he was brutal at the end of the year. He had a sub 900 save percentage in the second half, which opened the door for Linus Ullmark to come in and maybe take over, but he totally failed to capitalize on Hutton's struggles at the end. Like, he was just as terrible in the second half of the season. So neither Hutton or Ullmark strike me as guys that I want to depend on as a fantasy goalie, but at the same time, I think Buffalo, kind of like Chicago, like I think they're going to be a better team than maybe people expect. And, I'd love is to say that this is the season that Ullmark will take over and he could be a steal in drafts, like what I was saying about Cam Talbot before, especially because I just have no faith in Carter Hutton. Like, he's never been a starter in the league. Like, there was that one season where St. Louis played him for a bit and all of a sudden people thought of him as maybe a potential starter. But yeah, I'm much more afraid to say that Linus Ullmark is going to be a draft steal than I was like about Cam Talbot. So I don't know, Brian, maybe you could say it for me. Can you say that Linus Ullmark is going to be a draft steal so I don't have to?
I don't know that I'll say he's a steal, but I will say that he's got a good shot at supplanting Hutton. If Hutton goes bad, like last year, Linus Ullmark was better at 5-on-5 on the whole. Like, he was just about average in terms of how he'd compare against the average NHL goaltender. Like, he performed about at that level, whereas Hutton was below that level, was actually below Georgiev, Jake Allen, and Malcolm Subban in goals saved above average per 60 minutes. So yeah, I'm happy to say that Linus Ullmark should be the Buffalo starter, although I said that all of last year too. You want me to say that he'll be a draft day steal? I feel like he might be like a third week of free agency steal. I don't know that you need to go out and get him on draft day in most formats, but at some point you're going to be able to add him to your team and he's going to reward you handsomely. I'm in.
Okay, but you're not going to... I don't know. It's so weird, right? Is no Buffalo goalie going to get drafted? Because you're saying like you won't have to draft Ullmark because he won't get drafted. But like, are you saying like Carter Hutton will get drafted? Like, who's drafting Carter Hutton? I don't know. I guess we'll learn a lot in training camp, or probably not actually. But it'll be interesting. That's a tandem I would want. But actually, no. In this case, I wouldn't even want the tandem because I just don't really have faith in Carter Hutton. So I'd rather just take Ullmark and then be ready to drop him. Obviously, if it doesn't work out. But I think he could end up being good. Who would you rather have between Ullmark and Cam Talbot for next season?
Cam Talbot.
Yeah, I guess he's on a better team, probably.
It feels like last year Allmark didn't give Buffalo a whole lot of reasons to use him instead of Hutton, but there was probably opportunity for them to try him a little bit more. But they were really excited when they signed Carter Hutton. Although I'm trying to remember, have they changed GM since then? I do think that this is a part of it. I know you think that these are all professional organizations, like multi-million-dollar outfits that don't just play players based on their contracts. But I actually saw something, I think it was by Namita NN Stats on Twitter, who drew a line that showed the correlation between a defenseman's salary and their time on ice. And I know there's a causation argument to be made within that, but it was very interesting. I am a believer that organizations do let player contracts dictate some of their deployment decisions.
I mean, the thing is, it's such a broad general thing to say, and each situation is different, and I wouldn't want to just paint all organizations with that brush. I feel like there's a difference between a team that, say, is a sure thing to make the playoffs, and so maybe they're going to want to stick with their guys that they bet on, as opposed to, I feel like the Buffalo Sabres, they're going to need to win every game. They're going to be fighting to make the playoffs next year if they're lucky. Right. So I don't think they could and I think that's good for them financially. I don't think they need to justify signing Carter Hutton in exchange for not making the playoffs if they have a chance. So I think they're going to go with their best goalie. But I think there are probably other situations, like you said, where they maybe have better reason to just go with the guy that they're spending the big money on. And Carter Hutton, by the way, it's not as if he's making so much money, right? He signed for I thought he signed this big contract. He's getting $2.75 million a year. And he has 2 years left on the contract. So I don't think they even need to be too tied up with him. I think the plan was for him to sort of be a bridge before Linus Ullmark takes over. Now it's just time for Linus Ullmark to do it. So let's go, Ullmark. Be good. And with that, Brian, I think we're done the main signings. I've got a lightning round planned for us where we can go over all the remaining guys that might maybe have fantasy impacts that were either signed or traded in the offseason. But before we get to that, how about I drop our big announcement? Are you ready for it?
Yeah. 95 minutes into the show is a really great time for a big announcement. Let's do it.
I mean, when you say it, you're being sarcastic, right? But do you think that there's people who listen to Keeping Karlsson and stop partway through? I feel what's the point?
I don't think that's the case. But I also feel like there's a drama, I feel like we're ready for a lightning round. We're ready to wind things down, but we're about to wind everyone up.
If anything, I would say you want your big announcement to come at the end because people are still going to want to finish listening to the podcast and then act on the announcement. So now it'll be sooner to the time that it's over that they can act on the announcement rather than having to wait an hour and a half.
Send us your feedback at Keeping Karlsson. Would a big announcement fit better, within the first 30 to 60 minutes or in the 95th minute? I know what our advertisers think.
Well, yeah, but they're dumb. I think they're wrong. I think at the end of the podcast is just as good as the.
I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying we know what they think.
Yeah, well, I don't think advertisers know that much. Otherwise, we'd have more of them because obviously they don't know enough to know that advertising for Keeping Karlsson is a smart idea. Okay, big announcement time. Here it is. We are opening up Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League signups today. It is time. Cupful season is upon us. Oh, I blew the big announcement.
You also sound like you get. Yeah, no, that's great. You're doing great.
Wait, what did you say? I sound like you got choppy there.
I cut myself off. You're doing great.
Okay, you are being choppy though, so I don't know. Okay, they're here. Cupful season is upon us, and I'm super excited for the next season of our Patron Fantasy League. This is a league we've been doing, Brian, I think now for 5 seasons, if I'm right, or 4 seasons. Are we going to season 5 now?
This is season 5 of the best fantasy league in the world. And it's only grown into a super fun and competitive. It's grown into exactly what we hoped, right? Years we built, and I think it's built.
Yeah, I love the Cupful. It's the league. It's for no money, and it's the league that I care about the most year in, year out, because I'm competing against the smartest fantasy players in the world, the patrons of Keeping Karlsson, fighting for that fantasy like godlike status, like to be, because you have to climb your way up from, you start at the bottom tier, and you slowly scratch and claw your way to the tier 1. Only 14 people get to tier 1. And last season, Dave Betton, I'm sure he's happy that I said godlike status before. Dave Betton won the tier 1 ultimate champion, which is like, I feel like makes him one of the top fantasy players in the whole world, right? Like that's a really hard achievement. You have to like win season after season to get there, and then to win against all these great winners.
Where was this adulation when I won the year before?
I complimented you a lot. It was amazing. And this year, by the way, I'm going to be in tier 1, so I'm excited to take my shot. But if you're listening to this, you could be in the Cupful because it's open to anyone. Anyone can join if you're a patron of Keeping Karlsson. So basically, you go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You sign up to be a patron. You could even do it for $1 for now up until the end of August. But to play in the Cupful next season, you need to be a $5 patron. But then you'll get in, and you fill up the sign up form. We'll send you an invite on Yahoo, and we'll be off to the races. We're actually going to do our next podcast. We're going to be talking all about how to design a fantasy league in the context of the rules for the Cupful. We're actually going to be doing a rule change bracket where a bunch of people have been submitting their suggestions of potential rule changes. So you could check out actually our current Cupful rules. There's a lot of links I'm throwing at people. keepingkarlsson.com/Cupful to see the rules. But yeah, it's a fun league. It's Yahoo. It's head-to-head. There's playoffs. It's all the good stuff, and we'd love for you to get in on it this season and start your climb to fantasy glory. So just go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron, sign up to be a patron, and then you'll see in our posts or on our Facebook group how to sign up to play in the Cupful. So I'm super excited, and we'll obviously be mentioning it as we go. But Brian, how about now we go to the lightning round, all the remaining players that I think might be fantasy relevant, and then we'll end the show. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, lightning round time. And I believe we will talk about one Tampa Bay Lightning player in the lightning round, so that'll be perfect. But first, let's start in New Jersey. Anything here. Wayne Simmonds signed with the Devils. Any chance he can crack the top 6 or get on the power play 1 and be relevant again? Like this guy used to be really great in fantasy, right? When he was on Philly, he was generally on the second line or the top line on that top power play. And he was also great for your hits. If you were in a bangers league, he was a top guy. He fell off like so bad over the last couple of seasons. 2 seasons ago, we said, don't worry about it. He was just injured all the time. He's fine. And the last season was like, oh, maybe he actually just isn't good anymore. But now he goes to the Devils, and all he really has to do is beat out someone like Jesper Bratt or Coleman or I guess Jack Hughes. Like it might be tough to get on that top power play, but maybe he could do it. He's good. He sits in the front of the net. He pushes people around. He gets like tip-ins. Is there a chance that Wayne Simmonds is someone worth drafting in fantasy next year? Like compare him to say Corey Perry and James Neal.
He's probably about in the same class. We excused Simmons' awful 2017-18 season due to his injuries, and we can try to excuse an even worse 2018-19 season due to him not being loved by his team anymore, right? He fell out of his role. They signed James Van Riemsdyk, who essentially started doing all the things that Wayne Simmonds once did, except for throw hits. But Simmons was playing with guys like still a developing Nolan Patrick, Scott Lawton, Jordan Wheel, who are all decent players, but not ones with which Simmonds, I guess, could succeed. I would very much like for Simmonds to establish himself in the top 6 in New Jersey. The funny bit is that he has Blake Coleman to contend with, who seems somewhat similarly styled in terms of point scoring upside and throwing hits, but Coleman probably does it better than Simmonds, or at least based on his performance last year, he does. So yeah, Simmonds has a shot at the top 6, and maybe New Jersey wants to try using him down low on the top power play unit where he had a lot of success in Philadelphia. But after what he's done the last couple of years, Simmonds is going to have to show me something first if I'm going to take a chance on him in any leagues that aren't, so deep. I was actually going to ask you, after sharing my spiel on him, who would you prefer between Wayne Simmonds and James Neal?
Definitely James Neal. I'm for these guys that are like throwaway picks late. Give me James Neal because he might play with McDavid. But Wayne Simmonds he's kind of on my radar. Like not really. I probably at this point in their careers, Blake Coleman might be the better option. But Wayne Simmonds, he is only 30. Like hopefully, we thought maybe he'd recover from all his injuries last summer. Maybe it took a little longer. Maybe he's now fully healed. Maybe we're going to start seeing articles about Wayne Simmonds being in the best shape of his life, and he's going to really, turn things on the Devils. Like I don't think he's nobody. He was too good before to just completely disappear like he has. So we'll see. How about next? Let's go to Tampa. Curtis McElhinney signed as the backup. I feel like there's a good chance that he will be the guy that garners the most fab blown when like there's a Andre Vasilevsky injury. You know how sometimes there's like an injury mid-game and we don't know in time before free agency time in overnight, you know, like what the extent of the injury is. So then people like get excited, like, oh man, I got to grab McElhinney before someone else does. Like, I feel like that's the kind of thing that could happen next year. Vasilevsky, it happens to him every once in a while. He gets hurt. So yeah, McElhinney, obviously not going to do what he did last season because he's not going to get as many starts. But at the same time, he showed us he's pretty good. And he might be maybe one of the better backups to own next season. And I even wonder, Brian, let me throw this at you. Maybe Tampa's learned something from like how far Boston went. Hey, how far Carolina went with Curtis McElhinney. Maybe you don't want to ride your number one goalie too much. And maybe the reason why they signed McElhinney over just like going with Demang again, who was fine last year. But then they decided, yeah, we want to step it up a little bit and have a goalie that maybe we could give more time to let Vasilevsky rest so he'll be ready for the playoffs and not get swept in the first round. So maybe McElhinney's like a really good backup to draft in leagues.
That would be an interesting move for sure. The thing with Vasilevsky last year, though, is because he was out for injury for a bunch. It's not like he was really overworked. Although, if you consider being injured and rehabbing and getting back in shape work, then yeah, maybe he was overworked. Maybe he was still hurt. He did have an abysmal.
Oh no, Brian, you're having a choppiness.
Okay.
Do you want to maybe change your quality or something?
I already did, actually.
Okay. I guess can you just start it over again? Like it got to.
Oh no, it's on such a roll.
You don't have to start the whole thing again. You said like that would be an interesting thing. You said like his injury. Maybe go from the part where you said like it turns out actually because he was injured, he didn't even play that much.
I'll start over because I don't remember.
Okay.
That would be an interesting strategy for Tampa to try, is to rest Vasilevsky more, except for the fact, Elon, that he only played 53 games last season because he missed a whole bunch of time due to injury. And he was abysmal in the playoffs. He had an .856 save percentage while the Blue Jackets swept the Lightning. So the question is, like, was he still tired from rehabbing an injury or getting back from an injury, or was he still kind of injured and he played still more, even though he didn't start 29 of their games? Like 53 games is not a heavy workload, right? That actually might be the ideal. You don't want to take any more games away from Vasilevsky. So I agree with you, Elon, that maybe they'll look at playing Vasilevsky around the same amount, and McElhinney will be the benefactor. And
it's getting glitchy again. Ugh, what's happening? Is everyone noticing it on my side or Brian's side? When I say everyone, I mean the couple, Mason and Ryan. Brian, you could probably go from like maybe they will, like kind of what the last thing you were saying there. But yeah, I couldn't even hear you after a bit.
Damn.
Yeah, if people could let us know in the chat room. Is it me that's getting choppy and like I'm just noticing Brian is choppy, or are you hearing Brian being choppy? If you could let us know, that'd be super handy. Got to finish up this lightning round.
Damn, it's me.
So sad.
Okay. I will
a few sentences.
Oh, I'm just gonna start over again.
Oh, the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have to, but okay, go for it.
Well, if I glitch, try and like remember exactly what I just said.
Okay. It's hard, I guess you don't have a write up here, so you can't just like go to what you wrote down. Okay.
Okay. That would be a good idea, maybe, considering how badly Vasilevsky played in the playoffs, that maybe he needs to rest a little more, except he only played 53 games in 2018-19, and that was because he was injured for a bunch of it. So maybe those 53 games plus the injury was kind of work to recover and rehab from, or like he didn't fully heal up. I'm not sure what the deal was, and if there really can be a line drawn between his rest during the regular season and his play in the postseason. Of course, anything can happen in a 4-game sample. Unfortunately, the worst possible thing happened for Vasilevsky in the 4-game playoff sample that he had. In any case, I would think that maybe they do want to try and rest Vasilevsky a little bit during the regular season. Maybe that does mean he plays only 55 games. And if that's the case, then McElhinney definitely is the benefactor. We were saying he's okay for an NHL backup. He's not a guy you want to have in your crease for unknown periods of time, but he's sort of shifted into being a reliable backup over the last couple of years. So I think it's a good landing spot for him, and he's a great spot start anytime he gets in the net. And really deep leagues where you do carry backups, it's not like Toronto where it's, they just got rid of Garrett Sparks, but last year it was not even go get Garrett Sparks because he was going to blow up anytime he started for Toronto, and holding him wasn't worth it. But someone like McElhinney could get 25 starts, play pretty well on a very good Tampa team, could be worth holding in deeper formats.
Yeah, definitely. Last season with the Leafs, not only did Garrett Sparks suck when he played, but also he didn't play very much. The Leafs really rode Anderson as much as they could. And yeah, I don't know if you could really. The injury thing is interesting, right? Right, Brian, you're saying almost like him being injured was like his rest time, but I don't know if it works that way in terms of just the total number of games. I feel like it's just when he was healthy, he was playing a lot. So maybe that's like more of the wear, but I don't know. Either way, also, I'm not even necessarily saying that Tampa's going to learn a lesson from what happened with them. Maybe they're just going to learn a lesson from what happened with other teams being successful and try to like model their strategy off of what other teams were doing, which was resting their starting goalies more. So we'll have to see. Bad news for Louis Domingue, who I guess goes back to the minors after having a pretty okay season as a backup. I thought it was decent, but I mean, that's the only reason I could think of for why did they get McElhenney when they had Domingue. It must be because they want to maybe play their backup more and still have a better chance to win those games. Okay, next. So James Reimer went to Carolina. I don't know. Is he a threat to Petr Mrazek? Like Mrazek thrived in a tandem situation last year. I don't know if Carolina wants to all of a sudden be like, yeah, Mrazek, he was terrible forever. He came to us. We put him in a situation where he could succeed by not riding him too much. Now let's play him in 60 plus games. Like maybe they want to have a tandem again. And James Reimer, I guess, is the guy who would do that with him. So I don't know. Is there anything to James Reimer next year? Or is it the kind of thing where like at this point, for sure, don't draft him. And then I guess we'll like reassess if something changes.
I don't think you need to draft James Reimer, but he wouldn't be a bad lottery ticket to grab late in a draft where goalies are scarce. Both Reimer and Mrazek are probably, above average goalies over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. Of course, for Reimer, it was a lot easier to believe that than it is now that he laid a total egg last season. But coming into last season, he had 3 of 4 good years. So, this is telling a story about James Reimer that's pretty similar to the story about Petr Mrazek, where we have faith in these guys having this high upside that they just have not consistently been able to hold themselves to. So that could mean that the pendulum swings back and forth a lot. Of course, Reimer has some injury history that he needs to be concerned about. I would still imagine that Mrazek starts as number 1, Reimer is number 2, with the possibility of that to shift into a 1A, 1B situation.
Yeah, I just feel like this is another thing where I think people are almost like assuming that now Mrazek is the for sure starter because McElhenney's out. But I wouldn't be surprised if they went with something similar to last season just because it worked for them, right? But obviously, Reimer has to hold up his end of the bargain and be a decent goalie. Carolina actually wasn't done. They signed Ryan Dzingel, and I think they traded for Eric Haula. So that's 2 new players coming to the Hurricanes. Dzingel had 56 points last season. So it was like a career year for him, but he was also invisible and even healthy scratched once he got to Columbus from Ottawa. So like he was great on Ottawa, did nothing on Columbus. Now he goes to Carolina, and I'm definitely interested to hear what you think about Ryan Dzingel on the Hurricanes. And then Eric Haula, he actually had a really good year a couple seasons ago. In his first season with Vegas, he had 55 points in 76 games. He was centering the second line. Then he was injured most of last season, so we didn't get to see if he would be able to repeat that. Do you think either of these guys, Dzingel or Haula, can crack like the top 6 and have some sort of a fantasy impact?
Yeah, for these guys, it's all about deployment, right? But we have to also remember Nichas is coming up, and he's probably going to make the team out of camp. At least I'm assuming he is. And so he's going to take up a spot in the top 6, which probably he's a centerman. So that probably takes a spot away from Eric Haula, who's probably, turns into the 3rd line winger or 4th line centerman. Like he's good depth for Carolina. They have lots of weapons. Only God knows how they're going to try and use them and shuffle them through the year, though. But now you've got Haula and Dzingel. They're now on a team that's kind of like San Jose last year, Vegas the year before, when on any given night you could stream in the LeBlancs and the Donskoys and the Haulas of the world to see if they'll help you out. Ryan Dzingel, I still believe, has 20, 25 goals in him, so long as he's given the right role, which he was not given in Columbus. So that's what happened there. In Ottawa, he was in a starring role. Columbus, that role was not the same. So we'll see how Carolina wants to use him. He's actually someone I grabbed late in one of our Almanac pre-order slow drafts, and I'm sort of regretting it because it seems far from a guarantee he's going to have meaningful top 6 deployment, except I could see Carolina running a top 9 and having a place where he can still put up 45 points, even in the worst case.
Nah, I'm going to throw down like a 35 probably for Dzingel in the Almanac. I think I'm not high on him at all. Neither am I high on Eric Haula. I think you kind of nailed it. And yeah, Nichas, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure we're pronouncing correctly. It's spelled Necas, but I think we looked this up before we were talking about him last summer, and it is Martin Nichas. And yeah, I know Cam Robinson over on the Prospect Central podcast, which I really like, by the way. Check that out. He was saying how he loves the idea of seeing Nichas with Svechnikov next season, and he's excited about that. Yeah, Carolina, all of a sudden, super deep team, right? They've got Aho, Nino Niederreiter. Maybe they even still re-sign Justin Williams. That could be the top line like they did at the end of last season. Then you've got like, let's say, Svechnikov, Teravainen, and like a Nichas. So there's also still Jordan Stahl who could play center. And then maybe they could have like a third line with one of those other guys I mentioned, like Haula, DeZingle, Warren Fogle is like, seemed like he's pretty good. So like this team's pretty deep. They also have good defense. I like Carolina a lot for next year. Obviously, just Mrazek and Reimer will need to hold up their ends of the bargains. I feel like I've been using that turn of phrase too much in this episode. I'm never going to say it again. Hold up your end of the bargain. If I say it once in the almanac, you get your money back. Okay. Let's now go to Vancouver.
No, I'm canceling that. You're definitely going to say it.
Okay, well, remind me to
betting on yourself is another, like, we've definitely hit a high water mark in terms of how many times we should say that in a single episode.
Okay, definitely let me know, Brian, if I say any of those things in the almanac, because I don't want to have to refund all of this money after.
Well, you can refund your half of the money.
Okay. Vancouver signed Tyler Myers for a big contract that a lot of people are upset about. But let's just look at the fantasy impact here. 31 points last season. Do you expect him to do the same? Maybe get more? Maybe get less? Like, I feel like they've got Edler, who's slotted in probably to start on the top power play. And then they have Quinton Hughes. And yes, his name is Quinton. We've looked this up as well, who people are expecting to take over on the top power play. So I don't think there's any room for Myers to get that super prime deployment, but I don't know. What do you think? More than 31 points, or is that what he is?
Like maybe he'll get a little more. Myers had lost a few minutes of time on ice over the last 4 or 5 years. So maybe he gets some of them back in Vancouver now that the Canucks have committed to him in a big way. And so that should help him collect a few more points, help his peripherals. Like, I'm going to expect a little more from Tyler Myers than we've seen the last couple of years. But I think that's just going to be by virtue of him getting more minutes. I'm not getting any more excited about what his upside is than it has been in any of the past few seasons.
Yeah, there was another defenseman I was talking about earlier that I was a little excited about. Oh, yeah, Brandon Montour. Who would you take, Brandon Montour or Tyler Myers?
Depends on the categories. I think Montour has a better shot at 40 points, but Myers has a better shot at more minutes, which is more peripheral. So, pick your flavor.
Okay, interesting.
I think I'll go Montour.
Yeah, I think me too. I'm not too high on Tyler Myers. Mason is telling us that maybe it's Nachos. So
Mason is a native Czech speaker.
Damn, so I guess we should trust him. Oh, God damn it. We tried. Okay, another trade here. Anisimov to the Sens for, who was it? Who did Chicago get? Oh, Zach Smith. Okay, so the thing with the Sens, like we talked about it, right? Is it possible that Artem Anisimov could end up now as like the top power play centerman on Ottawa? Like he'd have to beat out, I guess, Colin White, I think is the front runner, Pajot, Chris Tierney. Any fantasy value for Anisimov or I guess Zach Smith going to Chicago?
Unless your league rewards penalty killers, then Artem Anisimov is probably not so helpful to you as an Ottawa center. Maybe Zach Smith can be, the guy that Anisimov was in Chicago for a couple years, where it's like, oh, look, he's playing with Patrick Kane tonight. Go at him. He could get a point, but I don't even think that's the role he's going to play. It's crazy in Ottawa. Like Colin White can be number one center if he can handle it, which I don't know if he can. I don't know if they have anyone like Pajot, Tierney. They could all be stop gaps, but I don't even think they have a number two center in Ottawa this year. But at least like the silver lining here is that the Sens have figured out how to tank right. Iced an awful team, finished last, but they've figured out the most important part, which is not to trade away your first round pick while you do those first two things.
Yeah, so they'll probably be bad again next season. And people are saying that they have a really strong prospect pool. So maybe in 2-3 years, if management knows what they're doing, maybe the Sens can bounce back. Yeah, it's
big if.
What do you think for Shabbat next year? What are we going to be putting down in the almanac? He had like 70 something points last season. Or we're going to be putting down 40? Like, how's this guy going to get so many points with the guys he's going to be playing with?
Yeah, it's almost, I feel like it's going to be like Anaheim last year. This is a team that not even good players will be able to succeed on, and they're like two good players on the team. So it might be even harder. I don't know. Like, I can't see him. 50 seems like the most possible, right? Who name their top power play unit?
Okay, Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah.
Okay. Thomas Shabbat.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2. I just need 3 more. That should be easy, right? Give me Colin White. Okay, That's 3. Let's throw in Bobby Ryan.
Sure.
And let's end up with maybe Tyler Ennis.
Way to avoid naming Artem Anisimov. That was an easy out for you.
Rudolph Balcers. Alex. No, they have a couple actually, guys. No, that's not fair, right? They had that. What was that guy's name? He has a fun name.
Maybe like Drake Batherson or Alex Formanton can make it up, or like I don't know. Anthony Duclair. Like the point is there is no first, like their first power play is like a third power play.
To be fair, let's just say, because I don't want to sound super dumb next year when Ottawa's like better than we expect. Like it is possible that they have kind of all these no-name guys, but just because we haven't heard of them doesn't mean they're bad. And like a young, fast team could maybe be good against some teams that are slower. Like we talked about Minnesota having all these older guys. Maybe they won't be able to handle all the exciting youth that Ottawa can throw at them. I don't know. We'll see.
But I think the other teams will be able to handle Nikita Zaitsev, Ron Hainsey, Mark Borowiecki, Craig Anderson, Anders Nilsson. Like it is dire.
And Nikita Zaitsev is okay, right?
There's like some sort of like macabre quality to the Senators in 2019-20. Like it's going to be something that you just want to watch for just how
it's going to be wild.
Yeah.
Eric Brandstrom is supposed to be that's what they got for Mark Stone, right? He's supposed to be really good. So we'll see if he can start.
Maybe he'll be on the top unit.
He could be. Yeah. Which goalie would you take? Craig Anderson or Anders Nilsson?
And I think it's going to be a split. They'll probably try and trade one of them partway through the year.
Hot take from Ryan in the chat room: Minnesota will finish below Ottawa.
Oh wow, that's an incredible hot take.
It's possible. I don't know. I wouldn't say Ottawa's like guaranteed to come last. There's going to be some competition there, but okay.
For sure.
So let's end the show. Hope you guys enjoyed it, Brian. I think that's everything. Do you have any other off-season transactions that you want to discuss? Because after this, we're done. Like we're not talking about these things anymore. We're prepping for the Almanac. We're getting excited for the Cupful. So this is your last chance.
Oh man, that makes it feel like super high stakes.
Oh, we didn't talk about Michael Furland going to Vancouver.
Oh, well, we should talk about him.
He might be okay.
Yeah,
I guess. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no. Well, why don't you interrupt me with 3 other questions?
No, Michael Furland, please.
It's him or JT Miller, right? One of those guys could have a big year in the Vancouver top 6. And of course, let's not forget Sven Berchi, who I've taken late. Like there's a lot. And you look down the list and you see like Josh Levo and Nikolai Goldobin. Like there's all these guys who it's like, oh, maybe if they play with Pettersson, they'll have a really great season. There's just a lot of them this year. So we'll see which of them ends up. So they all have like this upside, but they all have this possibility of falling completely flat.
Yeah, but also don't forget, like the second line, if you're playing with Bo Horvat, centering you, it's not terrible. Like, so if Furland ends up with Horvat, that could be okay. And Furland has also seen himself on top power plays in times when that surprised us. I guess at some point we'll hopefully talk about Jake Gardner signing somewhere. It's kind of weird that he's not signed yet. I wonder if Patrick Marleau will get signed. So, okay, maybe there'll be a couple more that we'll discuss as we go. But Brian,
Mitch Marner.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mitch Marner, that's a huge one, right? We'll see if Toronto figures it out. Apparently, this trade that they just made recently, I read something on Roto World where like they made a trade where they took on a contract, but for some reason, because it's long-term IR.
It was David Clarkson.
Yeah, they got David Clarkson. Somehow that's going to help them sign Marner. And then it was a bunch of math I didn't really follow. But like, I don't know. Maybe they'll sign Marner soon. Anyways, let's end the show. So again, let me recap all of our big things coming up. So first of all, the Cupful signups are open. We want you to get in there. You have it. Oh yeah, there's a deadline, right? Oh, we could say more things about the Cupful. We know the draft dates. Brian, while you look this up while I'm blabbing for a bit, okay? Let's tell people what the draft date will be for the Cupful. It's the Sunday before the season starts, and we might have an option you'll see in the sign-up form that you might be able to also draft on the Saturday night before the season starts if we get enough interest. But yeah, Sunday night before the season starts. The sign-up deadline is around September 12th, so you still have time. But also, yeah, you can sign up. So go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron, sign up to be a patron of Keeping Karlsson. Or if you already are a patron, then just check on the Facebook group or on Patreon, and you'll see very soon an announcement of how to sign up to play in the Cupful. And then our other big announcement is we are fast approaching the start of our recording of the Keeping Karlsson second annual audio almanac, NHL audio almanac. I forget the names of our things, but that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's not too late to pre-order and get in on a slow draft. So keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. And if you want to sponsor a chapter, keepingkarlsson.com/sponsor. So again, keepingkarlsson.com/patron/almanac and /sponsor should take you to everywhere you need to go. Brian, you'll link to all of these in our show notes, right? So people will be able to just click links.
Absolutely. It'll be so easy.
Okay. So with that, let's cue the outro music. And Brian, why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dabra Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our newest ones who definitely know there's a 10% patron discount on the Almanac. Ryan, John, Sergey,
Ryan,
Fenner.
wait, you glitched, and that was a fun, important thing. You
Where?
glitched on when you said there's a 10% discount.
Okay. And
Just start over since it's like one sentence.
This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our newest ones who definitely knew there's a 10% patron discount on the Almanac: Ryan, John, Sergey, Fenner, Rory, Jack, Ollie, Michael, Brett, Mark, Ryan, Andy, Dennis, Patrick, Joe, Dylan, James, Elliot, Frederick, Jean-Michel. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, Charting Hockey, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, and Elite Prospects. Oh, and Roto World.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, all of our resources. Thank you to all the new patrons. Brian, great job as always. Really excited to talk to you in a couple of weeks, along with Dave Betton and John Reed. And we're going to be having our Couple Rule Chains And we'll be having our Couple Rule Change Bracket episode. We're going to take all the suggestions of Couple Rule Changes, and we're going to decide one of them is going to win the bracket and get implemented and be a new rule in the Couple next season. It's going to be a wild, crazy podcast. I'm really excited for it. So we'll see you then. And until then, everyone, remember all those links I said before. And Brian, say your catchphrase. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, also until then, keep on keeping Karlsson.
Woo! Good job. Now I'm actually going to go do a Beyond Meat burger taste test. My wife and I are going to go to A&W and to Tim Hortons and try both of their plant-based burgers. And
is that on the show?
It might be. Do you think that's just on the show? I'm very excited for it. What do you guys think? Tweet at us and let us know what you think my favorite burger is between Tim Hortons and A&W.
I don't want to taint your... I think I already know, but I don't want to taint your perception.
Okay, I'll definitely message you, and I'll let the patrons know. I'll let everyone know, because I know everyone's waiting for this. But Brian, now we got to get to work on... Okay, this is the end of the show. Bye, everyone. Brian, now we got to get to work on posting our Couple sign-up form. So we'll do that tonight, and I'll work on the edit, and we'll do all that.
Okay.
And you'll do the show notes.
Great. Are we releasing this tonight or tomorrow night?
Might as well. Tonight, right?
No
time like the present.
Sure.
Unless you really don't want to.
No, we could do it tonight.
Okay, cool. I just need to eat some burgers, and then I'm going to go and edit the show.
Great.
Cool. Thanks, everybody, so much. And hopefully this worked. Hopefully we'll be able to actually get the audio
for this God.
And post it like normal. Otherwise, we'll have to do this again tomorrow.
Terrifying. Did you actually test whether it saved the audio from the first one?
No, it didn't let us. But it's on YouTube, so I think it'll just work on YouTube. So
I wish we had tested the full suite of necessary...
You know,
I don't want to end this now, just in case.
We have to.
Oh my God.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Good show.
It's great. You did a great job.
I'm terrified.
We'll do it again. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Ending broadcast.